At my wife's funeral, while I was holding back tears, my daughter-in-law leaned over to my son. She was not offering comfort. She was wearing a bright red dress that screamed for attention, and she whispered into his ear, "This isn't a funeral, it is a holiday. The old woman is gone and the money is ours." She thought I was a senile old man who couldn't hear. She thought I was too broken to notice. She was wrong. And when the will was finally read, she realized just how wrong she was. Before I tell you how I destroyed their lives with a single piece of paper, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Like and subscribe if you hate greedy relatives. I sat in the front pew of the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. The air smelled of Lily's old wood and the heavy, humid heat of a Georgia morning. My wife Esther lay in the mahogany casket just a few feet away. She looked peaceful, her hands folded over her favorite Bible. I, however, was not peaceful. I was a statue of contained rage. I looked at my watch. It was 10:15 in the morning. The service was supposed to start 15 minutes ago. The pastor, Reverend Lewis, looked at me with concern from the pulpit. The choir had stopped humming the opening hymn and was now shifting uncomfortably. Behind me, the whispers of the congregation were getting louder. These were people who had known us for 40 years. They knew respect. They knew punctuality. But the seat next to me was empty. My son, Trayvon, was not there. It wasn't traffic. It wasn't an accident. I knew exactly what it was. It was a power play, a statement. I sat there, my back straight, refusing to turn around and look at the doors. I felt the eyes of my neighbors burning into the back of my neck. They were pitying me. Not just because I was a widower, but because I was a father whose son couldn't be bothered to show up on time to bury his own mother. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. Esther had been a teacher for 30 years. She had shaped half the minds in this neighborhood. She deserved honor, and my son was stealing that from her even in death. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the back of the sanctuary banged open. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet church. The whispers stopped instantly. I didn't turn around immediately. I waited. I heard the click, click, click of high heels on the hardwood floor. It was a sharp, aggressive rhythm. It wasn't the walk of someone in mourning. It was the walk of someone on a runway. I finally turned my head slowly. There they were. Trayvon looked disheveled. His tie was crooked. His suit looked like he had slept in it, and his eyes were glued to the floor. He looked like a man being led to the gallows, but it was the person leading him that sucked the air out of the room. Courtney, my daughter-in-law. In a sea of respectful black and dark blue suits, Courtney was a flare of disrespect. She was wearing a dress the color of a fire engine. It was tight, it was short, it was cut low in the front. It was a cocktail dress for a nightclub, not a funeral dress for a 67-year-old woman. She wore oversized designer sunglasses indoors, hiding her eyes. She didn't walk quickly to apologize for the delay. She took her time. She held Trayvon by the arm, digging her fingers into his bicep, marching him down the aisle. She held her head high, challenging anyone to say a word. A collective gasp went through the church. I heard Mrs. Higgins, the deaconess, mutter, "Lord have mercy," behind me. Courtney didn't care. She stopped at the front pew, looked at me, and didn't say a single word of apology. She just huffed, smoothed her red dress, and sat down, taking up more space than she needed. She smelled of expensive perfume and stale champagne. Trayvon sat next to her, shrinking into himself. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at his mother's casket. He just looked at his hands. I looked at my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had put through college, and I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. He wasn't a man anymore. He was a pet. The service finally began. Reverend Lewis tried to bring the dignity back into the room. He spoke of Esther's kindness, her investments in the community, her quiet strength. I tried to focus on his words. I tried to remember the woman who had saved every penny she ever earned, who had turned her teacher's salary into a portfolio that would shock everyone in this room. But I couldn't focus, because right next to me, Courtney was restless. She was shifting in her seat, sighing loudly every time the pastor paused. She pulled out her phone. I could see the reflection of the screen in her dark glasses. She wasn't texting condolences. She was scrolling through a luxury real estate app. She was looking at mansions in Buckhead. Then during the moment of silent prayer, she leaned in close to Trayvon. The church was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. She moved her hand to his knee and squeezed it, not in comfort but in excitement. She lowered her head to his ear. Her voice was a low hiss intended only for him, but I have spent 40 years as a structural engineer. I know how sound travels. And I was sitting 6 inches away. She said, "Smile, baby. Stop looking so pathetic. This isn't a funeral. It is a holiday. The old witch is finally gone. We just hit the lottery. Trayvon didn't pull away. He didn't look shocked. He didn't shush her. He just gave a small, weak nod. That nod broke something inside me. It broke the last tether of fatherly protection I had for him. For years I had made excuses. I told myself she manipulated him. I told myself he was just weak. But in that moment I realized he was complicit. He was agreeing that his mother's death was a payday. My hand gripped the edge of the wooden pew. I squeezed it so hard I felt a splinter drive deep into the palm of my hand. The sharp pain was grounding. It was the only thing that kept me from standing up and strangling her right there in the house of God. I felt the blood trickle down my palm, warm and sticky. I didn't wipe it away. I needed the pain. I needed the anger. It was fuel. We moved to the cemetery for the burial. The Georgia sun was high and hot, beating down on the black umbrellas. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of freshly turned earth. When they lowered Esther into the ground, Courtney decided it was time to perform. She wailed. She made a show of dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. She leaned against Trayvon as if she were too overcome with grief to stand. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. But I saw her other hand. It was behind her back holding her phone. She was refreshing a banking app. She was checking the balance. She thought the money would hit the account the moment the dirt hit the casket. She lowered her sunglasses for a second and looked at me. Her eyes were dry. They were cold. They were calculating. She gave me a look of pure predatory triumph. She looked at me like I was a piece of furniture that came with the house, something to be discarded. She thought I was just a retired engineer with a broken heart. She thought I was weak. She thought today was her Independence Day. I stared back at her, my face a mask of stone. I didn't blink. You want a holiday, Courtney? I thought. I will give you one. I will give you a day you will never forget. But it won't be a celebration. It will be a judgment. As the first shovel of dirt fell onto my wife's casket, I made a silent vow. They would not get a dime. They would not get the house. They would get exactly what they deserved. The funeral was over. The war had just begun. I pulled my vintage Lincoln into the driveway, craving nothing but silence and the scent of my wife's perfume lingering in the empty halls. I wanted to sit in her favorite armchair and let the grief finally wash over me in private. Instead, what I saw made my blood run cold and my grip tighten on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned the color of ash. A massive orange moving truck was parked aggressively on my lawn. Its rear tires were crushing the bed of azaleas Esther had planted with her own hands 20 years ago. The front door of my house, the house I designed and built brick by brick, was wide open like a gaping wound. I stepped out of the car. The humid Atlanta air felt heavier than usual. I walked up the steps, not with the shuffle of a grieving widower, but with the heavy tread of a man walking into a war zone. The foyer was unrecognizable. It had been less than 2 hours since we left the cemetery, and yet my living room looked like a luggage claim area at the airport. Louis Vuitton suitcases were stacked in a pyramid in the center of the Persian rug. Boxes marked master bedroom and kitchen were piled high against the walls. They had not come to visit. They had come to conquer. Courtney emerged from the kitchen holding a glass of my iced tea. She had already made herself at home. She had kicked off her heels and was walking barefoot on my hardwood floors. Trayvon followed her, looking like a servant carrying 2 more boxes. He saw me and at least had the decency to look ashamed. He lowered his eyes and placed the boxes down gently, as if trying not to make noise in a library. But Courtney did not share his hesitation. She smiled that same predatory smile she had flashed at the gravesite. "Dad, you are home," she chirped. "We didn't want you to be alone in this big old mausoleum. Trayvon and I decided it is best if we move in immediately. You need family around you. You cannot possibly take care of this place by yourself. It is too much for a man of your age and condition." Condition. I stared at her. I am a 67-year-old retired structural engineer. I run 5 miles on the treadmill 3 times a week. I still consult for the city on bridge infrastructure. My only condition was a broken heart and a rising fury that felt like bile in my throat. But I said nothing. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hand tremble slightly as I reached for the banister. I had to play the part. If they thought I was weak, I would show them weak. "Thank you," I mumbled, my voice raspy. "That is very considerate. Courtney took a sip of my tea and grimaced. She set the glass down on an antique side table without a coaster. "We are going to make some changes, Dad. Brighten the place up. Make it livable." Just then, Whiskers walked into the room. He was Esther's cat, a 17-year-old tabby with clouded eyes and a slow gait. He missed Esther. He had been wandering the house all morning looking for her, meowing at closed doors. He walked toward the sofa, probably looking for his usual spot to nap. He passed too close to Courtney. Without breaking eye contact with me, she extended her foot and shoved the cat hard. It wasn't a nudge. It was a kick. "Get away, you filthy thing," she snapped. Whiskers let out a pained yowl and skidded across the polished floor, hitting the leg of the coffee table. He scrambled to his feet, terrified, and limped away under the dining chair. Something inside me snapped. A red haze clouded my vision. That cat was the last living thing Esther had loved daily. That cat had sat on her lap while she underwent chemo. I took a step forward, my hands uncurled, ready to grab her by her throat and throw her out the front door. I wanted to break her. I wanted to show her the strength of a man who had built skyscrapers. But I stopped. I saw Trayvon watching me. He looked terrified, not of her, but of me. He was waiting to see if the old man still had fire. If I exploded now, they would call the police or the doctors. They would say grief had made me violent. They would use it as proof of my instability. I forced my muscles to relax. It was the hardest physical thing I have ever done. I shuffled over to the dining table and scooped Whiskers up into my arms. I stroked his fur, feeling his little heart hammering against my chest. "He is just a cat, Courtney," I said softly, keeping my eyes on the floor. "He misses her too." Courtney rolled her eyes. "Well, keep him out of my way. I am allergic to dander and mediocrity. We will have to do something about him soon." She turned her back on me and started barking orders at Trayvon about where to put her vanity table. I carried Whiskers to the back room and set him down with a bowl of food. I locked the door. They were inside the gates. The invasion had begun, and I had let them in. I thought the suitcases were the worst of it. I was wrong. The erasure of my wife started 30 minutes later. I was sitting in my armchair in the corner of the living room, feigning a nap. My eyes were closed to slits, watching. Courtney had pulled a roll of heavy-duty black trash bags from under the sink. She snapped one open with a sharp crack that sounded like a whip. "Okay, Trayvon," she said. "Let us get this done before dinner. I cannot sleep in that master bedroom with all this junk around. It feels like a museum." She marched into the bedroom. My bedroom. The room Esther and I had shared for 40 years. I heard the sound of hangers sliding on the metal rod. I heard the thud of clothes hitting the floor. I stood up and walked to the doorway, leaning against the frame as if I needed the support. Courtney was pulling Esther's clothes out of the closet. Her Sunday dresses, her gardening coats, the silk shawl she wore to the opera. She was grabbing them by the armful and stuffing them into the black plastic bags. She wasn't folding them. She was treating them like garbage. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Courtney didn't stop. She didn't even look at me. "We are decluttering, Dad. You do not need all this stuff. It is depressing. Besides, we need the closet space. I have 3 seasons of wardrobe to unpack. These are Esther's things," I said. "They are old clothes, Cyrus," she corrected, using my first name with 0 respect. "Nobody wears this stuff anymore. Look at this." She held up a quilt. It was a patchwork quilt Esther had hand-stitched over the course of 5 years. It was made from scraps of Trayvon's baby clothes, pieces of her wedding dress, and fabric from my old work shirts. It was the story of our family sewn together with thread and love. "This is hideous," Courtney said, wrinkling her nose. "And it smells. God, the whole house smells. It smells like old people. It smells like sickness and medicine. We need to strip this place down to the studs if we are going to get any value out of it. We need to sanitize it." She balled up the quilt and shoved it deep into the trash bag. She tied the knot tight, sealing my memories inside plastic meant for rotting food. "Must and dust, baby," she said to Trayvon. "That is all this is. Grab those pictures off the dresser. They are cluttering up the surface." Trayvon stood by the dresser. He was holding a framed photograph of the 3 of us at his college graduation. Esther looked so proud in that picture. She was beaming, her hand resting on his shoulder. Trayvon looked at the photo, then he looked at his wife. "Maybe we should put these in a box, Courtney," he suggested weakly, "instead of the trash." Courtney stopped and glared at him. "A box to put where, Trayvon? In the garage, so rats can nest in them. We are moving forward. We are not looking back. Do you want to be stuck in the past with your daddy, or do you want to build a future with me? Toss it. Trayvon hesitated for 1 second. Just one. Then his spine collapsed. He dropped the framed photo into the trash bag. The glass cracked as it hit the floor. The sound of that breaking glass tore something loose in my chest. I looked at my son. He was a large man, tall and broad-shouldered. I had raised him to be strong. I had taught him to respect women, to honor his family, to stand up for what was right. But looking at him now, I saw a hollow shell. He was terrified of losing her. He was terrified of her anger. He was willing to erase his own mother to keep this woman happy. I wanted to rush forward and tear the bag open. I wanted to salvage the quilt and the photos. But if I did that, I would show my hand. I would show them that I was still the head of this house. And right now, I needed them to think I was a ghost. I needed them to think I was fading away. I let out a long, shaky sigh. "You are right," I said. My voice sounded hollow and defeated. "It does smell like old people in here. Maybe it is time for a change." Courtney smiled triumphantly. "See, Trayvon. Even Dad agrees. He knows what is best. He knows when it is time to let go." She tossed the full bag toward the hallway. "Take that out to the curb, Trayvon. The truck comes tomorrow morning." I watched my son drag the bag containing his mother's life out the front door. I watched him throw it onto the pile of trash on the curb. I felt a single tear roll down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of grief. It was a tear of finality. They had just thrown away their only chance at mercy. I turned away from the door. "I am tired," I said. "The funeral was long. I am going to rest in the study." "Don't sleep too long," Courtney called out cheerfully. "I am ordering pizza. I am not cooking in that outdated kitchen until we remodel." Remodel. She was already spending money she didn't have. I shuffled down the hall, dragging my feet. I walked past the master bedroom, which was now occupied territory. I entered my study and closed the heavy oak door. I turned the lock. The click was the most satisfying sound I had heard all day. I straightened my back. The tremor in my hands vanished. The stoop in my shoulders disappeared. I walked over to my desk, not as a frail old man, but as the engineer who had designed the foundations for the city stadium. This room was my sanctuary. It was soundproofed. I had built it that way so I could work late without disturbing Esther. Now it would serve a different purpose. I sat down in my leather chair and woke up my computer. It was a high-end machine with 3 monitors custom built. Courtney and Trayvon thought I used it to play solitaire and check emails. They didn't know about the server in the basement. 2 years ago, when Esther started getting sick, I noticed things going missing. Small amounts of cash, pieces of jewelry. I worried about home health aides. I worried about intruders. So I installed a state-of-the-art security system. It wasn't the kind you buy from a salesman. It was a hardwired, closed-circuit system with hidden cameras and microphones in every room of the house. The lenses were pinholes hidden in smoke detectors, crown molding, and bookshelves. I brought up the dashboard. A grid of 12 screens appeared. I could see the living room. I could see the kitchen. I could see the front porch where Trayvon was smoking a cigarette, looking miserable. And I could see the master bedroom. I watched Courtney. She wasn't unpacking. She was prowling. She opened my nightstand drawer. She rifled through my reading glasses and my Bible. She found nothing of interest. She moved to the bathroom. I switched the audio feed to the master bath. The quality was crystal clear. I could hear the water running in the sink. Courtney was standing in front of the medicine cabinet. She opened it. She wasn't looking for toothpaste. She was reading the labels on my prescription bottles. She picked up my blood pressure medication. She shook the bottle. She picked up my heart medication. She read the warning label out loud. Warning, she whispered. May cause dizziness. Overdose can be fatal. She stared at the bottle for a long time. A slow, cold smile spread across her face. It was the look of someone who had just found a solution to a difficult problem. She took her phone out of her pocket and snapped a picture of the label. Then she opened the bottle, dumped a few pills into her hand, and put them in her pocket. She put the cap back on and placed the bottle back exactly where she found it. Trayvon, she yelled toward the door, her voice changing instantly from calculating to casual. Babe, come here. I think we need to organize Dad's meds. He has so many. It would be so easy for him to get confused and take the wrong thing. We should help him manage them. I sat in the dark study, illuminated only by the glow of the monitors. I watched the woman who had just buried my wife steal my heart medication. I watched her plot my demise in my own bathroom. She thought she was the predator. She thought she was the fox in the henhouse. She didn't know the farmer was watching through the scope of a rifle. I leaned back in my chair. "You want to manage my meds, Courtney," I whispered to the screen. "Go ahead. Make your move." I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a fresh hard drive. I initiated a backup of the video feed. Evidence. The first brick in the prison cell I was building for them. Tonight was the invasion. Tomorrow the war would truly begin. I was not going anywhere, and neither were they. Not until I was finished with them. I waited until the heavy oak door of the master bedroom clicked shut. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the silence of the house that had been violated. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind was cold. It was the same cold calculation I used when inspecting a bridge for structural failure. I knew where the cracks were. Now I had to prove they were fatal. I walked into the master bathroom. The air still smelled of Courtney's cloying perfume, a scent that masked the underlying rot of her intentions. I opened the medicine cabinet. My hand hovered over the amber prescription bottle. My name, Cyrus Vance, was typed clearly on the label along with the dosage for my blood pressure medication. Lisinopril. I knew what those pills looked like. They were small, round, and pale pink. I had taken them every morning for 10 years. I twisted the cap off. The child safety lock clicked a sound that echoed loudly in the tiled room. I poured the contents into my trembling palm. They were not pink. They were white, oblong. They looked like potent sedatives or perhaps a high dose of digitalis. I wasn't a doctor, but I knew one thing for certain. If I took these, I would not wake up. I stared at the white pills in my hand. They felt heavy like lead weights. This wasn't just greed anymore. It wasn't just disrespect. This was attempted murder. My daughter-in-law had swapped my medication within hours of burying my wife. She didn't want to wait for nature to take its course. She wanted to accelerate the timeline. I could not flush them. If I flushed them, she would know I knew. I needed them to believe their plan was working. I needed them to get comfortable. I needed them to get sloppy. I poured the white pills into a tissue and folded it tight. I shoved the tissue deep into the pocket of my trousers. Then I opened the vanity drawer where Esther used to keep her vitamins. There was a bottle of calcium supplements. They were white and oblong. They weren't a perfect match, but to a casual observer they would pass. I filled my prescription bottle with the calcium pills and screwed the cap back on. I placed the bottle exactly where it had been on the second shelf right next to the mouthwash. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were hard. My jaw was set. I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. He looked dangerous. Good. He needed to be. I left the bathroom and retreated to my study, locking the door behind me. I sat down in front of my monitors. The glow of the screens illuminated the dark room. I put on my headphones and turned up the volume on the kitchen feed. Courtney and Trayvon were sitting at the kitchen island eating the pizza they had ordered. Grease stained the granite countertops I had installed for Esther's 50th birthday. Courtney was drinking red wine directly from the bottle. My wine. A vintage Bordeaux I had been saving for a special occasion. She took a long swig and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "You know, Trayvon," she said, her voice slurring slightly, "we need to be smart about this. We cannot just wait around for him to kick the bucket naturally. That could take years. His heart is too strong." Trayvon picked at a pepperoni slice, his shoulders hunched. "Don't talk like that, Courtney. He is my dad. Courtney slammed the wine bottle down on the counter. The sound made Trayvon jump. "He is a liability," she hissed. "Do you know how probate works, Trayvon? Do you know about inheritance tax?" Trayvon shook his head, looking miserable. "If he dies within 30 days of your mother, the estate taxes are streamlined," she explained, waving a hand dismissively. "It is a loophole. Or something like that. My cousin told me about it. But if he lingers on for years, we lose money. We lose equity. The market could crash. The house could lose value. We need to cash out now." Trayvon looked up, his eyes wet. "Are you saying what I think you are saying? Are you talking about helping him along?" Courtney leaned in close, her face twisted into a mask of cruelty. "I am talking about mercy, Trayvon. He is lonely. He misses his wife. Why prolong his suffering? Why prolong our suffering? Those pills I found, they are strong. If he gets confused, if he takes a double dose or a triple dose, who is to say what happened? Old men get confused all the time. It is tragic, but it happens. Trayvon pushed his plate away. I cannot do that, Courtney. I cannot kill my father. Courtney stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She walked around the island and stood over him. She grabbed his chin and forced him to look at her. Then she slapped him. It was a sharp, vicious crack. Trayvon's head snapped to the side. He didn't fight back. He just sat there taking it. Wake up, she screamed. Do you think we have a choice? Do you think we are doing this for fun? We are doing this because of you, Trayvon, because of your gambling, because of the $200,000 you owe to people who break legs for a living. I froze in my chair. $200,000. My son was not just weak. He was in deep. He was drowning. Courtney continued, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. They called me again yesterday. They know where we live. They know where your parents live. If we do not pay them by the end of the month, they are going to come for us. Do you want to end up in a ditch? Do you want me to end up in a ditch? Trayvon began to weep softly. I am sorry, baby. I am so sorry. I thought I could win it back. You never win, she spat. You are a loser, Trayvon. You have always been a loser. The only thing you are good for is your last name. That name is on the deed to this house. That name is the only thing standing between us and a bullet. So do not tell me what you cannot do. You will do whatever I tell you to do, because I am the only one saving your miserable life. She let go of his chin. Trayvon slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. So here's the plan, she said, pouring more wine. Tonight we make sure he takes his medicine. Tomorrow we see how he feels. If he is still walking, we double the dose. And in the meantime, we get that power of attorney signed. We need control of the assets before the coroner comes. I took off the headphones. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like white heat. My son was willing to let me die to pay off a bookie. He was willing to let this woman poison me to save his own skin. I looked at the picture of Esther on my desk. I am sorry, my love, I whispered. I failed him. I failed to raise a man. I raised a coward. But I was not dead yet, and I was not going to die for his debts. I needed a strategy. They expected a stubborn old man. They expected a man who would fight them on every detail. If I fought, they would be on guard. If I fought, they would be careful. I needed to be exactly what they wanted me to be. I needed to be confused. I needed to be frail. I needed to be senile. If they thought my mind was gone, they would get careless. They would speak freely in front of me. They would leave documents lying around. They would sign things they shouldn't. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the corner of the study. I unbuttoned the top button of my shirt. I messed up my hair, pulling a few strands out of place. I took off my watch and put it in my pocket. I practiced my posture. I slumped my shoulders. I let my jaw go slack. I practiced a tremor in my right hand. It was time for the performance of a lifetime. I unlocked the study door and shuffled into the hallway. I dragged my feet, letting my slippers scuff against the floorboards. I made my breathing audible, raspy. I walked into the kitchen. Courtney and Trayvon jumped. They looked guilty. They looked terrified. Dad, Trayvon stammered, wiping his eyes. We didn't hear you coming. I looked past him. I looked at the wall. I looked at the ceiling. I let my eyes drift unfocused around the room. Esther, I croaked. Esther, is that you? Did you make the pot roast? Courtney exchanged a look with Trayvon, a look of pure delight. He is losing it, she mouthed. She stepped forward, her face arranging itself into a mask of fake concern. Dad, she said loud and slow as if speaking to a child. Esther is not here. Esther is gone. Remember, this is Courtney. I looked at her. I squinted. I tilted my head. Buster, I said. Buster, come here, boy. Who let the dog in the kitchen? Buster was our golden retriever who had died 5 years ago. Courtney's eyes lit up. She didn't look offended. She looked like she had just won the lottery. He thinks I am the dog, she whispered to Trayvon. He is totally gone. The stress must have snapped his brain. She turned back to me. Come on, Dad. Let us get you to bed. You are tired. I let out a low, confused moan. Where is my ship? I need to check the rivets. The bridge is going to fall. Trayvon looked sick, but Courtney was practically dancing. Go get him some water, Trayvon, she ordered, and bring his pills, the new ones. While Trayvon ran to the bathroom, Courtney pulled out her phone. She didn't even bother to step out of the room. She stood right in front of me, assuming I was too far gone to understand. She dialed a number. Hello, she said, her voice sharp and businesslike. Is this Mr. Henderson, the realtor? Yes. This is Courtney Vance. I am calling about the property on Highland Drive. Yes, the big colonial. We are ready to move forward. We want to list it immediately. As is. Cash offers only. We want a quick close. She listened for a moment, nodding. No, do not worry about the owner, she said, looking directly at me with a smirk. He is incapacitating. I am handling his affairs now. He will be moving to a facility by the end of the week. Yes, bring the paperwork tomorrow morning. We will be ready to sign. She hung up the phone and looked at me. Good boy, Buster, she mocked, patting me on the head like an animal. You just sit there and be a good dog. We are going to take care of everything. I stared at her blankly, letting a little drool escape the corner of my mouth. But inside my mind was a steel trap. Make the call, Courtney, I thought. Bring the sharks. Bring the vultures. I want them all here. I want everyone to witness what happens when the dog bites back. Trayvon came back with a glass of water and the bottle of calcium pills. Here, Dad, he said, his hand shaking so hard the water spilled. Take your medicine. It will help you sleep. I took the pills. I swallowed them. I smiled a vacant, empty smile. Thank you, son, I said. You are a good boy. Trayvon flinched as if I had hit him. He turned away, unable to look at me. Courtney took my arm and led me toward the bedroom. That is right, she cooed. Sleep tight, old man. Tomorrow is a big day. She didn't know how right she was. Tomorrow was going to be the biggest day of her life, and the last day of her freedom. I sat in my wingback chair in the living room, a plaid blanket draped over my knees to complete the image of the invalid they wanted me to be. My eyes were half closed, my breathing rhythmic and shallow. To the casual observer, I was a man drifting in the twilight of his life, oblivious to the world. But my ears were sharp, tuned to the frequency of betrayal. The doorbell rang at 9 sharp. Courtney answered it before the second chime. I heard the oily slickness in her voice as she greeted the visitor. Mr. Henderson, right on time. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Mr. Henderson walked in. I watched him through my eyelashes. He was a man in a cheap suit that was trying too hard to look expensive. He smelled of stale tobacco and desperation. He didn't even glance at me. To him, I was just another piece of old furniture that needed to be hauled away. Nice place. Henderson lied his eyes, scanning the crown, molding not for its beauty but for signs of water damage. A bit dated, though. The market in this area is hot, but buyers want modern. They want open concept. This layout is a dinosaur. Courtney nodded vigorously. Exactly what I told my husband. It is a teardown, isn't it? Be honest. Henderson chuckled. Well, I wouldn't say tear down to a buyer, but between us, ideally, yes. The value is in the land. This lot is huge. You could fit 4 townhomes here, or a nice mid-rise condo complex. The structure itself, it is just wood and brick. It is in the way. My heart hammered against my ribs. This house was not just wood and brick. My grandfather bought this land when he came back from the war. My father built the frame. I designed the structural reinforcements that had kept it standing through 3 hurricanes. Every beam had a story. Every room held the echo of Esther's laughter, and they were talking about bulldozing it like it was a pile of trash. What are we looking at price-wise? Courtney asked, her voice trembling with greed. If we want a quick sale, cash only, no inspections. Henderson rubbed his chin. As is, with the occupant situation resolved, maybe $400,000. $450 if you get lucky and find a developer who is hungry. $400,000. The house was appraised at $800,000 last year. Courtney was willing to burn $500,000 just to get the cash in her hand before the weekend. Do it, she said. List it for $375. I want a bidding war. I want it sold by Friday. She didn't care about value. She cared about speed. She needed to pay off the sharks circling her husband before they broke his legs. She walked Henderson through the dining room, pointing out the antique chandelier. Does this add value, she asked. Or should we sell it separately? Sell it, Henderson advised. It looks dusty. Makes the place feel haunted. They walked right past me. Courtney heel-grazed my slipper. She didn't apologize. She didn't notice. He is out cold, she told the realtor, gesturing vaguely at me. The medication knocks him out. Don't worry about him. He will be in a facility by the time you show the place. I sat there a prisoner in my own home, listening to them strip the flesh off my life's work. I wanted to stand up and break Henderson his nose. I wanted to throw Courtney out the window, but I stayed still. I let the rage settle in my gut, heavy and cold. It was fuel. I would need it for what came next. Henderson left with a signed contract and a smile. Courtney closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a long, shaky breath. "We are doing it," she whispered to herself. "We are actually doing it." Then she yelled, "Trayvon, where are you? Stop hiding and get to work. We need to find the assets before the movers get here." Trayvon emerged from the hallway. He looked pale and sweaty. He was holding a crowbar he must have taken from my garage. "I found it," he said, his voice jumping an octave. "I found the safe." My eyes snapped open just a fraction. The safe. I had a wall safe installed in my study behind a portrait of Frederick Douglass. It was where I kept my engineering seals, my passports, and usually a small amount of emergency cash. But Trayvon didn't know that. He thought it was the mother lode. "Show me," Courtney commanded. They ran to the study. I waited a count of 10, then stood up. I moved silently across the rug, positioning myself in the hallway where I could see them through the open door without being seen. The portrait of Douglass was on the floor, face down. Trayvon was kneeling in front of the steel safe door. He was punching numbers into the keypad. "Try your birthday," Courtney suggested. "I tried it," Trayvon said, frustration leaking into his voice. "I tried yours. I tried Mama's birthday. I tried their anniversary. Nothing works. It is locked out for 5 minutes after 3 wrong tries." He gripped the crowbar. "I am going to pry it open. It is old. The hinges might be weak." He jammed the flat end of the crowbar into the seam of the safe door. He grunted, putting his weight behind it. Metal screeched against metal, a horrible sound that made my teeth ache. "Stop it!" Courtney hissed, slapping him on the shoulder. "You are scratching the finish." "Who cares about the finish?" Trayvon yelled back. "We are tearing the house down anyway. I care," Courtney shrieked. "That safe is high-grade steel. If we cannot get it open, we can sell the whole unit to a locksmith or a collector. Scrap metal is worth money too, you idiot. Every penny counts. Do not damage the goods." Trayvon dropped the crowbar. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Then how do we get in?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We need what is inside. Dad always said he kept the important stuff in here. The bonds, the gold coins. It has to be here. There were no bonds. There were no gold coins. Those were stories I told him when he was a child to make him think we were pirates guarding a treasure." He had remembered the stories but forgotten the lesson that the real treasure was the family. Courtney paced the small room like a caged tiger. "Think, Trayvon. What else would he use? He is simple. He is sentimental. Think about dates." I stepped into the doorway. I leaned heavily on my cane, letting my hand shake. I made a low, guttural sound in my throat. They both spun around. Trayvon looked like he had seen a ghost. Courtney just looked annoyed. "Dad," Trayvon stammered, "you should be resting." I shuffled into the room. I looked at the safe. I looked at the crowbar on the floor. I looked at my son. A thief in his own father's house. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt from the hardware store, crumpled and old. I held it out to Trayvon. My hand shook violently. I let the paper flutter in the air between us. Trayvon took it. He looked confused. "What is this?" "The code," I rasped. My voice sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "It is the code." Courtney snatched the paper from Trayvon's hand. She unfolded it. It was blank on one side. On the other, I had written a date in shaky handwriting. August 12th, 1976. "What is this date?" Courtney demanded, looking at me with suspicion. "Is this a trick?" I stared past her, fixing my eyes on the empty space on the wall where the portrait used to be. "The day she said yes," I whispered. "We were by the lake. It was raining. She was wearing a yellow dress. She said yes." Trayvon stared at the date. August 12th. That sounds right. That was before they got married. Courtney shoved him toward the safe. "Try it, now." Trayvon knelt down again. His fingers trembled as he punched in the numbers. 081276. Beep. The green light on the safe flashed. The heavy locking mechanism clicked. It was the sound of a jail cell opening. Or perhaps closing. "Open it!" Courtney screamed, her greed making her ugly. Trayvon pulled the handle. The heavy steel door swung open on silent hinges. Courtney pushed him aside and practically dove into the safe. She was expecting stacks of cash. She was expecting velvet bags of diamonds. She was expecting the salvation of her miserable, debt-ridden life. She reached in. Her hands clawed at the dark space. She pulled out a single thin envelope. She froze. She looked back into the safe. She felt around the corners. She patted the bottom shelf. "It is empty," she whispered. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. What? Trayvon asked, scrambling up. "Let me see." He looked inside. It was a steel box of nothing, just air and dust. "No, no, no!" Trayvon yelled. "It has to be here. Where is the money? Where are the savings bonds?" Courtney ripped open the envelope. Her hands were shaking so hard she tore the paper. She pulled out the contents. It was not a check. It was not a deed. It was a black and white photograph. It was a picture of me and Esther on our honeymoon. We were young. We were poor. We were sitting on the hood of a beat-up Chevy eating sandwiches. We looked happier than any millionaire I had ever met. On the back of the photo in Esther's elegant script were the words, "True wealth is what you cannot spend." Courtney stared at the photo. Her face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. She threw the photo on the floor. She screamed. It was a primal sound, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. She kicked the open safe door. She grabbed a book from the desk and threw it at the wall. "This is a joke," she shrieked. "A sick joke. Where is it? Where is the money, old man?" She turned on me. She advanced on me. Her fingers curled into claws. "You hid it. You moved it. Where is it? Tell me right now, or I swear to God I will." She stopped. She realized what she was saying. She realized she was threatening a helpless old man. She realized there was no point. She looked at the empty safe again. The emptiness seemed to mock her. The void was a mirror of her own soul. "He is broke," she whispered, the realization dawning on her with horrifying clarity. "He is broke. He spent it all. Or he never had it. We are digging for gold in a septic tank." Trayvon picked up the photo. He looked at his mother, his young face. For a second I thought I saw regret. Then he crumpled the photo in his fist and threw it in the trash can. "We are screwed," he said. "We are so screwed." I stood there swaying slightly on my cane. I watched them unravel. I watched the panic set in. They thought the safe was empty. They were wrong. The safe contained exactly what I wanted them to find. It contained the truth. It contained the proof that their greed would only lead them to nothingness. And it contained one more thing. A tiny high-definition camera hidden in the back corner recording their every word, their every threat, their every act of vandalism. I let out a low, confused moan. "Did you find the cookies Esther used to hide the cookies in there?" Courtney looked at me with pure hatred. "Get out!" she hissed. "Get out of my sight before I do something I will enjoy." I shuffled out of the room. I went back to my chair in the living room. I pulled the blanket up to my chin. I closed my eyes. Phase 1 was complete. They were desperate. They were angry. And now they were careless. They thought the money was gone. They didn't know the real fortune was sitting in a bank account in the Cayman Islands waiting for the rightful heir, and that heir was definitely not in this house. Tomorrow I would introduce them to the real legacy of Esther Vance, and it was going to cost them a lot more than a broken safe. The silence in the study following the discovery of the empty safe was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb that had failed to detonate, leaving everyone in the room waiting for the inevitable explosion. Courtney stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving. Her face was flushed a deep, mottled red. The veins in her neck bulged against her skin. She looked at the empty steel box, and then she looked at me. She didn't scream this time. She moved with a terrifying speed. She crossed the room in 2 strides and kicked the heavy leather armchair I was sitting in. The chair skidded backwards, scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I gasped, clutching the armrests, feigning a terror that was only half real. "Where did you put it?" she hissed, leaning down until her face was inches from mine. I could smell the stale wine on her breath and the metallic tang of her rage. "Do not play games with me, Cyrus. I know you have money. Esther didn't wear rags. This house isn't built of cardboard. Where is the liquid cash?" I shrank back into the chair, making myself small. "I don't know what you mean," I stammered, my voice trembling. "Esther handled the accounts. I just built the bridges." Courtney grabbed the lapels of my cardigan and shook me. "You are lying. You are a lying old man. You think you can hide it from us. You think you can protect it." She let go of me abruptly and I slumped back. She turned to Trayvon, who was standing by the door looking like a lost child. "Do something," she screamed at him. "Make him talk." "We have 24 hours, Trayvon. 24 hours before the interest on your debt compounds and those men come looking for a kneecap. Do you want to walk with a cane for the rest of your life?" Trayvon looked at me. His eyes were pleading, but not for mercy, for me. He was pleading for me to save him from his own mistakes. "Dad, please," he said, his voice cracking. "If there is money, you have to tell us. We are in trouble. Bad trouble." I looked at my son. I saw the weakness in his jaw, the fear in his eyes. He wasn't going to step in. He wasn't going to protect me from his wife's wrath. He was going to let her shake me until my pockets turned inside out. Courtney paced the room, knocking books off the shelves. She swept a collection of antique compasses onto the floor. Glass shattered, brass dented. "If you do not tell me where it is right now," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "I am going to make the call. I will call the state facility. The one with the bad reviews, the one where they tie people to beds and feed them through tubes. I will have you in a van within the hour. You will rot there, Cyrus. You will die alone in your own filth, and I will laugh while I sell this house for scrap." It was a credible threat. She had the power. She had the will. I knew I had to act. I had to give them a lifeline that was actually a noose. I let out a sob, a dry rattling sound. I raised a shaking hand and pointed toward the heavy oak desk in the corner. The desk I had built with my own hands 30 years ago. "The blue book," I whispered. "Esther is blue book." Courtney stopped pacing. She looked at the desk. She looked at me. "What blue book?" she demanded. "The secret drawer," I rasped. "Under the middle. You have to push the latch." Courtney gestured to Trayvon. "Check it, now." Trayvon rushed to the desk. He dropped to his knees. He felt under the center drawer. His fingers fumbled with the wood. I had designed that latch. It was tricky. You had to know exactly where to press. I heard the click. A small hidden compartment slid open with a soft hiss of well-oiled tracks. Trayvon reached in. He pulled out a book. It was a ledger bound in navy blue leather. It looked old. The corners were worn. The spine was cracked. It smelled of dust and old paper. I had spent 4 hours the previous night creating this forgery. I had used old paper stock I kept for drafting. I had used different pens to simulate entries made over decades. I had even baked the book in the oven on low heat for 10 minutes to age the pages. It was a masterpiece of deception. Trayvon opened the book. His eyes widened. He flipped through the pages faster and faster. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Courtney, come look at this." Courtney snatched the book from his hands. She began to read. I watched her face. I saw the skepticism, war with the greed. "These are handwritten," she said, suspicious. "Anyone could write this." "Look at the dates," Trayvon said, pointing. "This goes back 20 years. Look at the deposits. Mom was investing in tech stocks in the 90s. She bought into Apple. She bought into Amazon." Courtney flipped to the last page. The page I had carefully inked just 6 hours ago. "Total asset valuation," she read aloud. $5.2 million. Held in trust at the Zurich Private Bank. Account number ending in 449. The room went silent. $5 million. It was a number that changed everything. It was enough to pay off the gambling debt 20 times over. It was enough to buy the lifestyle Courtney desperately craved. But I wasn't done. There was one more entry. The hook that would keep me alive. "Read the bottom line," I whispered. "The insurance." Courtney looked down. Her finger traced the line of text. "Term life insurance policy. Beneficiary Cyrus Vance. Maturity value $2 million. Payout date upon survivor reaching age 68. She looked up at me. She did the math. My birthday was next week. If I died today, the policy might be contested. If I died today, the Swiss bank account might be frozen in international probate for years. But if I lived one more week, if I signed the papers, they would have access to $7 million. Courtney lowered the book. Her hands were trembling, but not with rage this time. They trembled with the adrenaline of a gambler who just hit the jackpot. $7 million, she whispered. "It is real." She looked at Trayvon. "We are rich. We are filthy rich." Trayvon looked at me. "Does he have access? Can he withdraw it?" Courtney looked at the ledger again. "Sole signatory power, Cyrus Vance." She closed the book gently as if it were a holy text. She placed it on the desk. She took a deep breath. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The veins in her neck receded. The flush left her face. Her posture softened. She turned toward me and the snarl was gone, replaced by a look of tender concern that made my skin crawl. She walked over to me. She didn't stomp. She glided. She knelt down beside the chair she had just kicked. She reached out and smoothed the lapels of my cardigan. She picked a piece of lint off my shoulder. "Oh, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with syrup. "I am so sorry. I do not know what came over me. The stress of the funeral, the grief. It is just too much for all of us." She looked up at me, her eyes wide and innocent. "You know how much we loved Mom. We just want to make sure her legacy is protected. We want to make sure you are taken care of." I looked at her. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I blinked slowly like a man waking up from a nap. "Esther said we have to save it," I mumbled. "For a rainy day." "Yes, Dad," Courtney cooed, patting my hand. "And it is raining. But we are here now. We are going to hold the umbrella." She stood up and pulled me gently to my feet. She dusted off the back of my trousers where the dust from the chair had settled. "You must be exhausted," she said. "Trayvon, help your father to the sofa. I am going to make him some tea. Real tea. Not that instant garbage." Trayvon rushed over, looking relieved that the storm had passed. He took my arm. "Come on, Dad. Let us get you comfortable." I leaned on him, letting him take my weight. I shuffled toward the door. As we passed Courtney, I looked at her. I smiled, a goofy, senile smile. "You are a good girl," I said. "Esther always liked you." Courtney smiled back. A radiant, dazzling smile. "I love you too, Dad," she said. "We are going to take such good care of you. We have a big future ahead of us." I walked out of the study. I let them settle me onto the sofa. I let them put a pillow behind my head. I closed my eyes. They saw a helpless old man who was their ticket to millions. But in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw the truth. They had taken the bait. They had swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. $7 million. It was a beautiful number. A number worth killing for. A number worth keeping me alive for. But the Zurich account didn't exist. The insurance policy was a fiction. The only thing real in that ledger was the ink I had used to write their sentence. They were going to spend the next week treating me like a king. They were going to wait for my birthday. They were going to dream of yachts and mansions. And while they dreamed, I was going to turn their reality into a nightmare. Courtney hummed in the kitchen as she waited for the kettle to boil. She was happy. She thought she had won. "Enjoy the holiday, Courtney," I thought. "Because the bill is coming due, and you cannot afford it." 2 days after discovering the fake ledger, Courtney decided it was time to celebrate our imaginary fortune. She did not call it a victory party. She called it a celebration of Esther is life. It was a grotesque lie. She invited 50 people, none of whom had ever met my wife. They were her friends. A collection of social climbers, real estate sharks, and people who wore designer logos to distract from their maxed-out credit limits. The transformation of my home was nauseating. A fleet of white vans descended on the driveway at noon. Men in white coats carried in crates of lobster, caviar, and truffles. A sommelier set up a tasting station in the foyer right in front of the grandfather clock my father had built. They covered Esther's hand-embroidered table runners with sequined gold cloths. They replaced her favorite hydrangeas with towering arrangements of exotic orchids that looked like alien creatures. I sat in my corner chair watching the circus. Courtney was in her element. She was wearing a black dress that cost more than my first car. She was barking orders at the head caterer, a French man who looked ready to quit. "I want the champagne tower here," she commanded, pointing to the center of the living room. "And make sure it is the Dom Perignon. None of that sparkling wine nonsense. We are celebrating a legacy." She walked past me and dropped a piece of plastic into my lap. It was a platinum credit card. My name was on it, but it was a supplementary card I had given Esther for emergencies. Courtney had dug it out of Esther's wallet, which was still sitting on the dresser. "Here, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I am using this for the deposit. Since this is for Mom, it is only right that the estate pays for it. Do not worry. I will handle the accounting." She didn't ask. She informed me. She assumed that with $5 million sitting in a Swiss bank account, a $50,000 party was pocket change. She assumed I was too senile to care about the balance. I picked up the card. It felt cold in my hand. It was the card Esther used to buy Christmas presents for the grandchildren she never got to meet. Now it was being used to buy the loyalty of strangers who would forget my wife's name before the dessert course. "That is fine, Courtney," I mumbled, staring at the plastic. Esther liked parties. Courtney patted my cheek. Exactly. She would want us to be happy. She would want us to enjoy the fruits of your labor. She snatched the card back and marched off to pay the caterer. I watched her go. She was spending money that existed, but she was spending it on a card that was about to become a useless piece of plastic. I waited until she was distracted by the arrival of the DJ. I shuffled to the kitchen where the landline phone hung on the wall. I picked up the receiver. I dialed the number on the back of my own card, which was linked to the same account. "Security department, please," I whispered. When the operator answered, I put on my best confused old man voice. "Hello, this is Cyrus Vance. I seem to have lost my platinum card. I think someone might have stolen it." "Yes, please cancel it immediately." "No, do not send a replacement yet. Just freeze everything, right now." "Thank you." I hung up. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the jaws to snap shut. The guests arrived at sunset. They parked their leased BMWs and Mercedes on the grass, ruining the lawn I had just reseeded. They walked into my house with the confidence of people who owned the world. They drank my wine. They ate the lobster. They laughed loud, braying laughs that echoed off the high ceilings. Courtney was holding court in the living room. She had Trayvon standing next to her like a trophy husband holding her purse while she gestured with a champagne flute. "We are just so blessed," she told a woman with too much plastic surgery. "Cyrus has done so well for himself. We are looking at properties in the south of France for the summer. It is what Esther would have wanted." Then she saw me standing by the stairs. I was wearing my old cardigan and slippers, holding a tray of empty glasses I had instinctively started collecting because I could not stand the mess. "Oh, look, everyone," she called out, clapping her hands for attention. "There is our patriarch." Poor Cyrus. The room went quiet. 50 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. I felt like a specimen in a jar. "He is a little confused these days," Courtney explained, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that reached every corner of the room. "The grief, you know. It has been hard on his mind. He forgets things. He thinks he is a waiter sometimes." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It wasn't kind laughter. It was the laughter of relief. They were relieved it wasn't them. They were relieved they were young and rich and sharp. "Look at him," a man in a blue velvet suit sneered. "He looks like the help, like the wushu." Courtney giggled. "Oh, stop it, Brad. He is harmless." "Dad, why don't you get Brad a refill? He is dry." She pointed at the man as empty glass. It was a command, a test. She wanted to see if I would submit. She wanted to show her friends that she controlled the money and the man. I looked at Trayvon. He was looking at his shoes. He wasn't going to save me. I shuffled forward. I took the man as glass. "Yes, sir," I said, keeping my head down. "Right away, sir." I walked to the bar. I poured the wine. I brought it back. The man took it without saying thank you. He turned his back on me and continued talking about his golf handicap. I retreated to the corner near the bookshelf. I watched them. They were vultures in silk and diamonds picking at the carcass of my dignity. Then I saw a woman pointing at the wall. It was a collection of African masks Esther and I had brought back from our trip to Ghana 10 years ago. They were hand-carved, beautiful, and sacred to us. "God, look at that hideous stuff," the woman said, wrinkling her nose. "It looks like voodoo junk." Courtney laughed. "I know, right? It is so tacky. We are going to clear all of that out next week. We are going for a minimalist, modern look. White walls, abstract art, none of this tribal nonsense. Tribal nonsense. Those masks represented our heritage, our history. Esther had cried when we bought them, overwhelmed by the connection to her ancestors. And Courtney was going to throw them in a dumpster to make room for white walls. I felt a heat rising in my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the fire of injustice. They were erasing us. They were erasing our culture, our history, our lives. They were replacing it with a hollow beige emptiness that matched their souls. I gripped the tray in my hands until the metal bent slightly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them all out, but I held on. I held on because the bill was coming. And the price of this disrespect was going to be higher than they could pay. The party wound down around midnight. The guests were drunk, full, and happy. They were standing by the door exchanging empty promises to get together soon. The catering manager, a stern woman with a clipboard, approached Courtney. "Mrs. Vance," she said, "we are wrapping up. I have the final invoice here." Including the overtime for the staff and the extra cases of wine you ordered, it comes to $15,400. Courtney waved a hand dismissively. Of course. Just run the card on file. The platinum one. The manager nodded and pulled out a mobile card reader. She inserted the card. I stood in the shadows of the hallway watching. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. Boom! 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 Courtney continued chatting with her friends, ignoring the transaction. She was already planning the next party. The machine beeped, a harsh, dissonant sound. The manager frowned. She pulled the card out and wiped the chip. She inserted it again. Beep! Courtney looked over, annoyed. Is there a problem? The manager looked at the screen. It says decline, ma'am. Courtney laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. That is impossible. That card has a $50,000 limit. Try it again. The manager tried again. Beep. Declined, she said firmly. It says call issuer. Card reported lost or stolen. The room went silent. The guests who were leaving stopped. They turned around. Nothing smells sweeter to these people than the scent of someone else's failure. Stolen, Courtney screeched. That is ridiculous. It is my father-in-law's card. He gave it to me. She turned to me, pointing an accusatory finger. Dad, tell her. Tell her the card is good. I stepped out of the shadows. I looked at her with wide, innocent eyes. My card? I asked. I lost my card this morning. I called the bank. Did you find it, Courtney? Courtney's face went white, then red, then a blotchy purple. You old fool, she hissed. You reported it lost. I nodded vigorously. Yes. I couldn't find it. I was scared. Esther said, never lose the card. The manager cleared her throat. Ma'am, I need payment. Now. My staff needs to be paid. Courtney looked around. Her friends were watching. The man in the blue velvet suit was smirking. Do you have another card? The manager asked. Courtney fumbled with her clutch. She pulled out her own wallet. She pulled out a Visa. Try this one, she muttered. Beep. Declined. Try this one. An Amex. Beep. Declined. She was maxed out. Every single card. Trayvon, she snapped. Give me your wallet. Trayvon shook his head, backing away. I do not have anything, Courtney. You know I don't. The humiliation was absolute. She was standing in the middle of her victory party, unable to pay the bill. She looked at her friends. Brad, she said, her voice trembling. Could you spot me? Just until tomorrow. The bank made a mistake. I will wire it to you first thing. Brad, the man who had treated me like a waiter, laughed. He patted his pockets. Sorry, Courtney. Left my wallet in the car. Bad luck. One by one, her friends turned away. They checked their phones. They suddenly remembered early appointments. They scurried out the door like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Courtney was left alone with the manager and a $15,000 bill. I will write a check, she whispered. We do not accept personal checks, the manager said coldly. Credit or cash, or I call the police. Theft of services is a felony, ma'am. Police. The word hung in the air. Courtney looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. She needed the old man to save her. She needed the senile fool to fix it. I yawned loudly. I am tired, I said. It is past my bedtime. Good night, everyone. Great party. I turned and walked up the stairs. I didn't look back. I heard Courtney sobbing. I heard her begging the manager for time. I heard her calling her mother, asking for a loan. I walked into my bedroom. I locked the door. I sat on the bed and listened to the sound of her world cracking open. It was a beautiful sound. Better than any music the DJ had played. She had wanted to show off. She had wanted to be the queen. Now she was just a beggar in a borrowed dress. And tomorrow I was going to introduce her to the rest of the family she didn't know existed, the family that was going to finish what I had started. The morning after the disastrous party, the air in my house was toxic. Courtney was in the kitchen screaming into her phone, calling every relative she had, begging for a loan to pay the caterer before they filed charges. Trayvon was sitting at the table, his head in his hands, looking like a man waiting for the executioner. They were so consumed by their own self-inflicted misery that they didn't notice me put on my coat and slip out the back door. I walked 3 blocks to the small neighborhood park. It was a gray morning mist clinging to the oak trees. I sat on a bench near the duck pond. I wasn't there to feed the birds. I was there to meet the future. 5 minutes later, a young woman approached. She walked with a purpose. She wore a sharp navy blazer and carried a leather briefcase. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She looked nothing like the chaos I had left behind at the house. She looked like order. She looked like justice. She stopped in front of me. She didn't smile. She studied my face with eyes that were a mirror image of my wife's eyes. "Hello, Grandpa," she said. "Hello, Maya," I replied. "Thank you for coming." She sat down next to me, maintaining a professional distance. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a file. "I reviewed the trust documents you sent over encrypted email," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "Everything is in order. The structure is bulletproof. If they try to contest it, they will be buried in litigation for a decade. And since they are broke, they will not last a week." I looked at her. She was 22 years old. She was finishing her final year of law school at Emory, top of her class. She was brilliant, she was strong, and she was the granddaughter my son had thrown away like trash. "You look like her," I whispered. "You look just like Esther." Maya softened for a fraction of a second. She closed the file. "Grandma Esther was the only reason I didn't hate the name Vance," she said. "She wrote to me every month. She sent me books. She sent me encouragement. She made sure I knew I wasn't a mistake." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was Esther's favorite brooch, a silver dove with diamond eyes. "She wanted you to have this," I said, handing it to her. "She wanted to give it to you herself on your graduation day. But since she cannot be there, she wanted you to wear it when you take back what is yours." Maya took the brooch. Her hand trembled slightly. She pinned it to her lapel. It looked perfect there. "I am ready, Grandpa," she said. "I am ready to face them." I nodded. "I knew you would be. But before we go into that room tomorrow, I need you to know the whole truth. I need you to know why your father left. I know why he left." Maya said, her voice hardening. "He left because I was inconvenient. He left because he didn't want the baggage of a child with a woman he met in a college library. It was not just that I said, it was Courtney." Maya looked at me. Courtney. She knew about me. She knew I confirmed. When Trayvon told her about your mother, when he told her she was pregnant, Courtney gave him an ultimatum. She told him that if he acknowledged you, if he spent one dime of his salary on you, she would leave him. And she would take the connections, the social status, and the lifestyle he was so desperate to have. Maya let out a short, bitter laugh. "So he chose a lifestyle over a life. He chose fear," I corrected. "He was afraid of being poor. He was afraid of hard work. Courtney promised him the easy road. She told him her family had money. She told him she would make him a king. He didn't know she was lying about her wealth just as much as he was lying about his character." I paused, looking at the ducks gliding on the water. "But there is one thing he never knew, Maya. He never knew that Esther and I paid for everything. When he walked away, we stepped in. We paid your mother his rent. We paid your medical bills. We paid your tuition from kindergarten to law school. We set up the shell corporation that sent the checks so Trayvon would never find out. If he knew, he would have told Courtney. And Courtney would have made our lives a living hell 20 years ago." Maya stared at me. Her eyes were wide. "You paid," she whispered. "It wasn't a scholarship. It wasn't a grant. It was us," I said. "It was always us. We couldn't claim you publicly, Maya. We couldn't risk Courtney cutting us off from Trayvon entirely. We foolishly thought we could save him too. We thought if we stayed close, we could fix him. We were wrong. We couldn't save him. But we could save you." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She took a deep breath and composed herself. "You didn't just save me, Grandpa. You gave me the weapons to fight back. And tomorrow I am going to use them." She wasn't angry at us. She understood sacrifice. She understood the long game. She was a true Vance. I reached into my coat pocket again. This time I pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. "This is your invitation," I said. "The reading of the will is tomorrow at 10 o'clock at Mr. Blackwood's office." Maya took the envelope. She ran her thumb over the seal. "Do they know I am coming?" she asked. "No," I said. "They think they are going to inherit the earth. They think they are walking into a coronation. I want you to be the surprise. I want you to be the shock that stops their hearts." "I will be there," she promised. "And I will be early." We sat there for a moment longer, two conspirators in a park surrounded by morning mist. I felt a surge of pride so strong it almost hurt. This was my legacy. Not the house, not the money, but this young woman who had turned rejection into armor. "I should go," I said, standing up. "If I'm gone too long, they might get suspicious. Or worse, they might try to sell the copper wiring out of the walls." Maya stood up too. She hugged me. It was a fierce, protective hug. Be careful, Grandpa, she said. They are desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. I know, I said. But I am dangerous too. They just forgot. I watched her walk away, her stride confident, her head held high. She disappeared into the city, ready to prepare for the final battle. I turned to walk back home. My step was lighter. I felt energized. The pieces were all in place. The trap was sprung. I walked out of the park and onto the sidewalk. I was waiting for the traffic light to change when a black SUV sped past me. It was speeding, weaving slightly in the lane. I recognized the car. It was Trayvon's leased Range Rover. He must have been coming back from a meeting with his bookie, or perhaps he was out trying to pawn his watch. He slammed on the brakes as the light turned red, stopping right in the crosswalk. I froze. I was standing 10 feet away from his window. He looked out. He saw me. His eyes widened in shock. He wasn't expecting to see his senile father standing on a street corner in downtown Atlanta looking sharp and alert. Then he looked past me. He looked in the direction I had just come from. Maya was crossing the street a block away. She was visible. Her profile was clear. Trayvon stared at her. He squinted. I saw the gears turning in his head. He saw a young black woman. He saw the resemblance to his mother. He saw the confident walk, but he didn't recognize her. He didn't know who she was. He looked back at me, his face twisted in confusion and paranoia. "What are you doing here?" he shouted through the closed window. "Who was that girl?" I didn't answer. I just smiled. A cold, knowing smile. I tapped my wrist where my watch would be if I hadn't taken it off. "Time is running out, son," I mouthed. The light turned green. Cars behind him started honking. Trayvon hesitated. He looked from me to the retreating figure of Maya. He looked terrified. He sensed a trap, but he couldn't see the teeth. He slammed on the gas and peeled away, leaving a cloud of exhaust in his wake. He was panicking. Good. He drove home thinking his father was having clandestine meetings with strangers. He drove home wondering what secrets were being traded on street corners. He didn't know he had just seen his own reckoning walking away in a navy blazer. He didn't know that the girl he ignored was holding the deed to his destruction in her briefcase. I walked the rest of the way home, humming a hymn Esther used to sing. Tomorrow Trayvon would meet his daughter, and she would introduce herself not with a hug, but with a gavel. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the curtain was about to rise on the final act of their tragedy. The next evening was a study in desperation. The party had been a disaster, a financial black hole that had sucked away what little credit they had left. But the real crisis was happening on Trayvon's phone. He had been pacing the kitchen for an hour, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a hushed, terrified whisper. "Please, I just need a few more days," he begged. "The money is coming. It is guaranteed. My father is signing it over. No, do not come to the house. Please, I swear on my life." He hung up and leaned against the refrigerator, sliding down until he hit the floor. He looked like a man who had just been told he had 24 hours to live. In a way, he had. Courtney was not pacing. She was sitting at the kitchen island, a document in front of her. It was a power of attorney form. It was comprehensive. It gave her full control over my medical decisions, my real estate, my bank accounts, and my life. She had printed it off the internet. It was crude, but it was legal if notarized. "Get up, Trevon," she snapped. "Crying isn't going to pay Vinny the shark. We need his signature. Tonight." She grabbed a pen. She grabbed the document. She marched into the living room where I was watching the evening news, pretending to be engrossed in a story about a cat stuck in a tree. "Dad," she said, her voice tight and strained. "We need to do some paperwork. For Mom." I looked at her slowly. "Paperwork." Esther handled the paperwork. "Esther is gone." "Dad," she said, impatience leaking into her tone. "We need to settle her estate. We need to pay her bills, but the bank won't talk to us because your name is on the accounts. We need you to sign this so we can take care of everything for you, so you don't have to worry." She placed the document on the coffee table in front of me. She put the pen in my hand. "Just sign right here," she said, pointing to the line at the bottom. I looked at the paper. Durable power of attorney. It was bold. It was clear. It was a death warrant for my freedom. I didn't sign immediately. I adjusted my glasses. I leaned forward. I started to read. I read the first line. I read it out loud, slowly stumbling over the words. "I, Cyrus Vance, hereby appoint Courtney Vance as my attorney in fact." "Dad, you do not need to read the whole thing," Courtney interrupted. "It is just standard legal stuff. Boilerplate. Just sign it so we can pay the funeral home. They are calling us." That was a lie. I had prepaid the funeral home 10 years ago. I kept reading. To sell, convey, and mortgage, real property. To withdraw funds from any banking institution. This says you can sell the house, I said, looking up at her. Courtney forced a smile. It just gives us the option, Dad, in case we need to downsize, in case you need money for medical care. Medical care. The care she was planning to provide with white pills from a hidden stash. I went back to reading. I read every clause. I read every comma. I took my time. I let the silence stretch. I let the tension build. Courtney started tapping her foot. Tap, tap, tap. Trevon came into the room. He looked at the paper. He looked at the clock. Is he signing it? He asked, his voice shaking. He is reading it, Courtney hissed, like he is studying for the bar exam. Dad, please, Trevon said. We need this. It is important. Why is it important? I asked, looking at my son. Why is it so urgent, Trevon? Because Mom would want us to handle things, he stammered. She wouldn't want you stressed. I looked back at the paper. I was at the bottom of the page. The signature line was waiting. If I signed this, I was handing them the keys to my kingdom. If I didn't sign it, they would escalate. They were desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. I needed to buy time. I needed to push them, but not too far. Not yet. I held the pen over the line. My hand hovered. It shook. Courtney lost it. She grabbed my wrist. Her fingernails dug into my skin. Sign it, she screamed. Sign the damn paper, old man. We do not have time for this. She pressed my hand down. The pen tip touched the paper. Ink started to flow. I didn't fight her. I let her guide my hand. But I didn't write my name. I wrote a message that would freeze the blood in their veins. I wrote in shaky, jagged letters, I know about the pills. I stopped writing. I lifted the pen. I looked at Courtney. There, I said. All done. Courtney snatched the paper away. She looked at it expecting a signature. She expected to see Cyrus Vance. Instead, she saw my accusation. She stared at the words. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She read it again and again. What is this? She whispered. Trevon grabbed the paper from her. He read it. His face went gray. The color drained from his lips. He knows, he gasped. Oh my God, Courtney. He knows about the pills. He knows what we did. He looked at me with pure terror. He saw his father not as a victim, but as a witness. Courtney snatched the paper back. She ripped it in half. Then she ripped it again. And again. She tore it into confetti. He doesn't know anything. She shrieked. He is senile. He is writing gibberish. He is crazy. She threw the pieces of paper at me. They fluttered down like snow. He wrote pills because he wants his medicine, she yelled, trying to convince herself. That is all it is. He is an addict. He is confused. No, Courtney, Trevon said, backing away. That wasn't gibberish. That was a sentence. A clear sentence. He knows we swapped the meds. He knows we tried to kill him. He looked at the door. He looked ready to run. We have to go, he said. We have to leave, before the police come. Courtney grabbed him by the shirt. We are not going anywhere, she screamed. If we leave now, Vinny kills you. If we leave now, we have nothing. We are broke, Trevon. We have nowhere to go. She turned to me. Her eyes were wild. She looked like a cornered animal. You think you are smart, old man? She hissed. You think you can play games with us? You think a little note is going to save you? She walked over to the phone on the side table. She ripped the cord out of the wall. She put it in her pocket. Tomorrow morning, she said, her voice shaking with rage. Tomorrow morning, after the lawyer reads the will, we are not coming back here. We are driving straight to Shady Acres. I know a doctor there, Dr. Miller. He owes me a favor, a big one. She leaned in close to my face. He will sign the papers, Cyrus. He will sign whatever I tell him to sign. He will certify you are a danger to yourself and others. He will lock you in a padded room and throw away the key. You won't need a signature then. You will just be a ward of the state. And I will be your guardian. She straightened up. She smoothed her dress. You blew your chance to do this the easy way, she said. Now we do it the hard way. No more pills, no more accidents. Just a straitjacket and a rubber room. She grabbed Trevon's arm. Come on, she said. We have to pack. We need to be ready to move as soon as the will is read. Trayvon looked at me one last time. He looked like he wanted to say something. He looked like he wanted to apologize. But he didn't. He let her drag him out of the room. I sat there in the silence. The pieces of the torn document lay on the floor around my feet. They were going to commit me. They were going to erase me. But they had made one fatal mistake. They assumed the will was going to give them the power they needed. They assumed Esther had left them the money. They didn't know that the reading of the will wasn't their victory lap. It was their execution. And tomorrow I wasn't going to a nursing home. I was going to watch them burn. The storm outside was hammering against the roof tiles like 1,000 fists demanding entry, but the real danger was already inside the house, sleeping down the hall. I stood in the center of my bedroom. The air was cold and stale. I walked over to the door. I turned the lock. The deadbolt slid home with a heavy metallic thunk. It wasn't enough. I grabbed the heavy mahogany chair from my reading nook and wedged the back of it under the doorknob. I jammed the legs into the carpet until they caught on the subfloor. It was a crude barricade, but it would buy me seconds. And seconds were the difference between life and death tonight. I moved to my desk. I didn't turn on the overhead light. The glow from my laptop screen was the only illumination in the room, creating long, dancing shadows on the walls. It was time to assemble my ammunition. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Project Renovation. A boring name for a folder containing the blueprints of my family is destruction. I began to sort the files. First came the audio from the kitchen 3 nights ago. I put on my headphones. The sound quality was pristine. I heard the clinking of wine glasses. I heard Courtney is voice sharp and nasal. If the old man does not die in 30 days, we lose the tax break. We need to speed this up. I heard the slap, the sound of flesh hitting flesh. I heard Trayvon whimper. It is for your gambling debt, Trayvon. Do you want to lose your legs? I saved the file. I named it Exhibit A, Conspiracy to Commit Murder. Next was the video from the study. The camera hidden in the safe had captured everything. The greed on Courtney's face when the door swung open. The rage when she found it empty. The way she kicked my chair. The way she threatened to throw me in a state facility to rot in my own filth. I saved the file. Exhibit B, elder abuse and intimidation. Then came the audio from this morning. The phone call where I played the confused old man and Benjamin admitted he needed a specialist to handle my behavior. The recording where he inadvertently confirmed they were planning to gaslight me into insanity. I saved it. Exhibit C, psychological warfare. I dragged every single file into a compressed folder. My finger hovered over the mouse. This was it. Once I sent this, there was no going back. I wasn't just reporting a crime. I was sending my son to prison. I was destroying the only bloodline I had left. I looked at the progress bar as the upload to the cloud began. 10%, 20%. I thought about Trayvon as a boy. I thought about teaching him to catch a baseball in the backyard. I thought about the time he scraped his knee and cried in my arms. I had protected him then. I had put a bandage on the wound and told him it would be all right. But this wound was gangrenous, and you cannot bandage gangrene. You have to cut it out 50%. I opened my email client. I typed in the address for Mr. Blackwood. He was a shark of a lawyer, the kind of man who ate prosecutors for breakfast. I had retained him 3 days ago with a retainer that cost more than Trayvon made in a year. Subject line evidence for tomorrow. I attached the folder. I added a note. Mr. Blackwood, if I do not arrive at your office by 10 tomorrow morning, send this file directly to the district attorney and the homicide division. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Burn them down. I hit send. The message whooshed away into the digital ether. It was done. The gun was loaded, cocked, and pointed at their heads. They just didn't know it yet. I shut the laptop. I sat in the darkness, listening to the rain lash against the window pane. The house groaned, settling into the night. It was just past 2 in the morning when I heard the floorboard creak in the hallway. It was a specific board, the third one from the top of the stairs. I knew every sound this house made. I had laid those floorboards myself 40 years ago. Someone was outside my door. I held my breath. I reached into my nightstand drawer and wrapped my hand around the heavy brass flashlight I kept there. It wasn't a gun, but it could crack a skull if swung with enough torque. There was a soft scratching sound against the wood, then a knock. It was so faint I almost missed it. Dad. It was a whisper, a broken, ragged whisper. I didn't answer. I sat perfectly still, my muscles coiled. "Dad, please, I know you are awake." It was Trayvon. He wasn't trying to break in. He sounded like he was sliding down the door, sitting on the floor in the hallway. I walked softly to the door. I didn't touch the handle. I stood with my ear pressed against the wood. I could hear him crying. It was a pathetic, wet sound. "I am sorry, Dad," he wept. "I am so sorry. I didn't want it to be like this. I never wanted to hurt you." I closed my eyes. For a second, just a split second, my heart wavered. This was my son, my boy. He was in pain. He was scared. "She made me do it, Dad," he continued, his voice thick with mucus and tears. "She said they would kill me. The bookies, they are going to kill me, Dad. I was just trying to survive. I didn't mean to let her treat you like that. I am a coward. I know I am a coward." He hit the door with his fist, a soft thud of frustration. "Please open the door, Dad. Let me explain. Maybe we can fix this. Maybe you can help me one last time. Just pay the debt, Dad, please. If you pay the debt, she will stop. She will leave you alone. We can go back to how it was. Go back to how it was." He wanted me to bail him out again. He wanted me to use Esther as life savings to pay for his mistakes so he could go back to ignoring me until he needed money again. My hand moved toward the chair. I gripped the back of it. I was about to pull it away. I was about to open the door and look my son in the eye. Maybe there was a shred of decency left in him. Maybe if I offered him a way out, he would take it and leave Courtney. Then I heard it. Another floorboard creaked. Further down the hall, Trayvon stopped crying instantly. "What are you doing?" a voice hissed. It was Courtney. She sounded like a viper striking in the dark. "I am talking to him," Trayvon whispered frantically. "I am trying to fix it, Courtney. I cannot do this anymore. He is my father." "You idiot," she spat. Get up off the floor right now." I heard the sound of fabric rustling as she grabbed him. I heard him stumble as she yanked him to his feet. "He is not your father right now," Courtney snarled. "He is a piggy bank, and we need to break him open." "Do you think he cares about your tears? Do you think he is going to hand over $5 million because you said sorry?" "Let go of me," Trayvon said, but his voice was weak. "Listen to me," she hissed, and her voice was right against the door now. She knew I was listening. She wanted me to hear. "You owe $200,000, Trayvon. If that old man wakes up tomorrow and decides to donate his money to a cat shelter, you are a dead man. Vinny will not just break your legs. He will put you in a cement mixer. The only way you live is if he dies, or if he signs." "But he is my dad," Trayvon sobbed. "He is an obstacle," she said coldly. "He is a wall standing between you and your life. Now wipe your face. Go back to bed. And pray he sleeps through the night. Because if he walks out that door tomorrow without signing that power of attorney, I am going to leave you. I will leave you to the sharks, and I will not look back." There was a long silence. I waited for Trayvon to defend me. I waited for him to tell her to go to hell. I waited for the sound of him standing up for his blood. Instead, I heard a sniffle, then the sound of heavy, defeated footsteps walking away toward the guest room. He had chosen. He had chosen the woman who wanted to kill me over the man who had raised him. Courtney stayed by the door for a moment longer. I could hear her breathing. Slow, steady, predatory. "Sleep tight, Cyrus," she whispered against the wood. "Enjoy your last night in this house." Then she walked away. I let go of the chair. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now, not from fear, from grief. The son I loved had died in that hallway. The man who walked away was a stranger. I went back to the bed. I didn't get under the covers. I sat on the edge, staring at the wall. I didn't sleep. I watched the digital clock on the nightstand count down the minutes of my old life. 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour. At 6 a.m., the rain stopped. A gray, pale light began to filter through the curtains. It wasn't a cheerful sunrise. It was the color of a tombstone. I stood up. My joints were stiff, but my mind was clear. The grief was gone. It had been burned away by the cold, hard truth. I walked to the closet. I pushed aside the few flannel shirts Courtney hadn't thrown away. I reached into the back where I kept my garment bag. I unzipped it. Inside was my black suit. It was 20 years old. It was the suit I had worn to my retirement party. It was the suit I had worn to accept the city's award for engineering excellence. It was a suit of armor. I showered, I shaved, I watched the razor glide over my throat in the mirror. One slip and it would be over. but my hand was steady. I was a surgeon preparing for an operation. I put on a crisp white shirt. I tied my black tie. I put on the suit. It fit a little looser than it used to, but it still looked sharp. I polished my black shoes until I could see my reflection in the leather. I walked over to the dresser. The only thing left on it was a small framed photo of Esther that I had rescued from the trash bag before Traven took it out. It was a picture of her smiling in her garden surrounded by roses. I picked it up. I ran my thumb over her face. "You always told me I was too soft on him, Esther," I whispered to the photo. "You told me I let him get away with too much." "You were right." I put the photo in my inside pocket right next to my heart. "But do not worry, my love," I said, my voice hard as iron. "I am not soft anymore. Today is not a holiday for them. Today is eviction day." I looked around the room one last time, the room where we had shared dreams, the room they had violated. "I am taking out the trash, Esther," I promised. "I am taking it all out." I unlocked the door. I kicked the chair away. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet. I walked down the stairs. My footsteps were heavy and loud. I wasn't sneaking anymore. I was marching to war, and I was not taking any prisoners. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime revealing the penthouse lobby of Blackwood and Associates. The carpet was thick enough to swallow the sound of my footsteps, and the air smelled of lemon polish and expensive leather. It was the smell of power. It was the smell of judgment. I checked my reflection in the glass doors. My black suit fit perfectly. My tie was straight. The man looking back at me was not a victim. He was a prosecutor. I was not alone. Walking a half step behind me was Marcus, a man the size of a vending machine with a neck as thick as a tree stump. He was a private security contractor recommended by Mr. Blackwood. He wore a dark suit and an earpiece, and his eyes scanned the room with professional paranoia. I had hired him for two reasons. First, because I genuinely feared what Courtney might do when her world collapsed. Second, because I wanted to send a message. I was done being vulnerable. We walked toward the heavy double doors at the end of the hall. The receptionist nodded at me with recognition. "They are already inside, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice hushed. "They arrived 20 minutes early." Of course they did. Vultures always circle early when they smell a carcass. Marcus opened the door for me. I stepped into the conference room. It was a cavernous space dominated by a long table made of polished walnut. The view from the floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire Atlanta skyline, a sprawl of glass and steel under the morning sun. Courtney and Trayvon were sitting on the left side of the table. They looked like they were posing for a magazine cover titled "Winners of the Lottery." Courtney was wearing a white dress suit that looked suspiciously like something a celebrity would wear to court. It was crisp-tailored and screamed innocence and wealth. She had a new designer bag sitting on the table in front of her like a trophy. Trayvon was wearing a suit I had bought him for his first job interview 10 years ago. It was tight in the shoulders now, but he had tried to dress it up with a silk pocket square. He looked nervous, drumming his fingers on the wood. When I walked in, Courtney stopped whispering to Trayvon. She spun her chair around. Her eyes widened when she saw Marcus standing behind me, arms crossed over his massive chest. She looked him up and down, her lip curling in a sneer that she didn't bother to hide. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," she said, her voice dripping with condensation. "And who is this Cyrus? Did you hire a nurse to help you to the bathroom? That is adorable. I told you Shady Acres has staff for that. You didn't need to bring your own help." She laughed a short, sharp bark of amusement. She thought I was frail. She thought I needed physical support. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table. I didn't sit immediately. I stood there, my hands resting on the back of the chair, looking down at them. "This is Marcus," I said, my voice steady and deep. "He is not a nurse. He is security. He is here to ensure that the peace is kept, and to remove anyone who forgets their manners." Courtney's smile faltered for a second. She looked at Marcus again. He stared back at her with zero emotion. She shifted in her seat, pulling her purse closer. "Security?" she scoffed. "Whatever makes you feel important, Dad. Just sit down so we can get this over with. We have a busy day. We have movers coming at noon." She checked her watch, an oversized gold piece that was definitely new. She was already on a schedule. Get the money, move the old man, sell the house. I sat down. Mr. Blackwood was already seated at the other end of the table. He was a man of few words with silver hair and eyes that had seen every type of human depravity. He nodded at me. "Good morning, Mr. Vance," he said. "Good morning, Arthur," I replied. Trayvon looked between us. "You know him?" he asked, surprised. I thought Mom handled the legal stuff. I looked at my son. I know a lot of people, Trayvon. You would be surprised who I know. Mr. Blackwood cleared his throat. He opened a thick file folder in front of him. The sound of the paper turning was the only noise in the room. We are waiting for one more party, Mr. Blackwood said, checking the wall clock. Courtney frowned. One more party. What are you talking about? There is no one else. Cyrus is the only one left, unless you mean the bank representative. Mr. Blackwood didn't answer. He just looked at the door. 10 seconds later, the handle turned. The heavy door swung inward. Maya walked in. The transformation was incredible. The girl I had met in the park wearing a simple blazer was gone. In her place was a legal shark. She wore a charcoal gray power suit that fit her like armor. Her hair was pulled back tight, revealing the sharp, intelligent angles of her face. She carried a slim leather portfolio. She walked with a stride that ate up the distance between the door and the table. She didn't look at Trayvon. She didn't look at Courtney. She walked straight to the empty chair on my right side, directly across from them. She pulled it out and sat down, placing her portfolio on the table with a deliberate thud. She looked at Mr. Blackwood. I apologize for the delay, counselor. Traffic on Peachtree was a nightmare. Mr. Blackwood smiled. You are right on time, Ms. Vance. The sound of her last name hit the room like a physical blow. Trayvon went pale. He stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He recognized the eyes. He recognized the chin. He was looking at a ghost from 20 years ago. Courtney reacted differently. She stood up so fast her chair tipped backward and hit the wall with a crash. Who the hell is this? She screamed, pointing a manicured finger at Maya. What is she doing here? This is a private family meeting. This is for the reading of a will, not a job interview. Get her out. She looked at Marcus. Security. Do your job. Get this random girl out of here. Marcus didn't move a muscle. Sit down, Mrs. Vance. Mr. Blackwood said, his voice cutting through her hysteria like a blade. No, I will not sit down, Courtney yelled. I know who she is. I recognize her. She is that bastard child, isn't she? That mistake from college. She turned on Trayvon, grabbing his shoulder and shaking him. You told me she was gone. You told me you paid them off years ago. Why is she here, Trayvon? Did you invite her? Are you trying to cut her in on my money? Trayvon looked terrified. I didn't, he stammered. I swear, Courtney, I haven't seen her since she was a baby. I do not know why she is here. He looked at Maya. His eyes were pleading. He wanted her to disappear. He wanted his mistake to vanish so his wife would stop screaming. Maya looked at him. Her expression was ice cold. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She looked at the man who had abandoned her, and she felt nothing. Courtney turned back to Mr. Blackwood. You cannot be serious. She has no claim here. She is illegitimate. She is not family. This is insulting. I want her removed immediately, or I am filing a complaint with the Bar Association. Mr. Blackwood took off his reading glasses. He looked at Courtney with a mixture of pity and disdain. Ms. Maya Vance is not an intruder. Mrs. Vance, she is a named party in this meeting. In fact, she is an honored guest. Honored guest. Courtney spat the words out like poison. She is a gold digger. She heard Esther died, and she crawled out of the woodwork to see if she could get a handout. Well, she is not getting a dime. Not one single dime. She looked at Maya with pure hatred. You hear me, little girl. You are wasting your time. You are nothing to us. You are just a line item on an old expense report. Get out before I have you arrested for trespassing. Maya leaned forward. She rested her elbows on the table. She interlaced her fingers. I am not here for a handout, Maya said calmly. Her voice was smooth, polished, and dangerous. And I am not trespassing. I was invited. By the owner of the estate. Courtney laughed a high-pitched, hysterical sound. The owner is dead, honey. Esther is dead. And Cyrus is sitting right there doing whatever I tell him to do. She looked at me, expecting me to back her up, expecting the senile old man to defend his wife against the intruder. I sat perfectly still. I looked at Courtney. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just watched her dig her own grave. Mr. Blackwood put his glasses back on. If everyone is seated, we will proceed, he said. If you continue to disrupt these proceedings, Mrs. Vance, I will have you removed by security. And since Mr. Vance pays for the security, I assure you they will follow his orders, not yours. Courtney looked at Marcus. He took a half step forward. It was a subtle threat, but it worked. She righted her chair and sat down fuming. She glared at Maya, shooting daggers with her eyes. "Fine," she hissed. "Let her stay. Let her watch us get everything. It will be a good lesson for her. She can see what real family looks like." Trevon sank lower in his chair, trying to make himself invisible. He couldn't look at his daughter. The shame was radiating off him in waves. Mr. Blackwood opened the will. It was a thick document bound in blue paper. "I will begin with the inventory of the estate," he announced. "This is to establish the value of the assets in question." Courtney leaned forward. Her greed instantly overpowered her anger. She licked her lips. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment the numbers became real. The estate of Esther Vance includes the primary residence located at 45 Highland Drive, appraised current market value of $1.2 million. Courtney gasped. 1.2. She looked at Trayvon. "Henderson lied to us," she whispered. "He said 400. It is worth triple that. We are rich, Trayvon. Just the house makes us rich." Mr. Blackwood continued, ignoring her outburst. "Liquid assets held in joint checking and savings accounts totaling $350,000. Courtney nodded. "Okay, good start. Pocket change, but good. Investment portfolio managed by Vanguard and BlackRock consisting of blue-chip stocks and municipal bonds, current valuation $2.1 million. Courtney grabbed Trayvon's hand. Her fingernails dug into his skin. I saw him wince, but he didn't pull away. Her eyes were wide, glowing with avarice. $2 million. $2 million. And finally, Mr. Blackwood said, turning a page. The contents of the Zurich Trust, established in 1995, currently holding cash and liquid assets totaling $3.2 million. The room went silent. Courtney stopped breathing. Her face went slack. $3.2 million, she whispered. She did the math in her head. House, investments, cash, Zurich. Almost $7 million. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. It was enough to pay the debts. It was enough to buy the penthouse. It was enough to never work again. It was enough to rule the world. She squeezed Trayvon's hand so hard his knuckles turned white. She looked at him with an expression of pure ecstasy. "We did it," she hissed. "We actually did it. We won." She looked across the table at me. She didn't see a father-in-law. She saw a signature. She saw a golden goose. She looked at Maya. She smirked. "See that, honey," she said. "That is what you missed out on. That is real money. And it is all ours." She sat back in her chair, crossing her arms. She looked like a queen on her throne, waiting for the crown to be placed on her head. "Okay, Mr. Blackwood," she said, waving her hand. "Skip the boring parts. Just read the part where she leaves it all to her beloved husband so we can get out of here. We have champagne to drink." Mr. Blackwood looked at her over the rim of his glasses. He didn't smile. "Very well," he said. "Let us proceed to the distribution of assets." He turned the page. The paper rustled loudly in the quiet room. Maya sat like a statue, her face impassive. I gripped the armrest of my chair. This was it, the summit, the peak of the roller coaster right before the drop. Courtney closed her eyes, savoring the moment. She didn't know the track ended in midair. She didn't know she was about to fall. Mr. Blackwood cleared his throat and began to read the words that would end her life. Mr. Blackwood adjusted the cuffs of his shirt and looked directly at Courtney. He did not look like a man about to hand over a fortune. He looked like a judge about to deliver a sentence. He cleared his throat, and the sound was like a gavel striking wood in the silence of the room. "To my son Trayvon and his wife Courtney, the will began." The words were Esther is. I could hear her voice in the room, calm and measured. "I know you have been waiting for this day for a long time. In fact, I believe the exact sentiment expressed at my funeral was that this day is like a holiday." Courtney stopped breathing. Her face, which had been flushed with the anticipation of wealth, drained of all color until she looked like a wax figure. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She gripped the edge of the walnut table so hard her knuckles turned skeletal white. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide with terror. She realized in that split second that the senile old man she had mocked in the church pew had heard every single word. Trayvon made a low, choking sound. He pulled at his collar as if it were suddenly strangling him. He knew his mother. He knew she did not make idle observations. If she wrote it down, it was a verdict. Mr. Blackwood continued reading, his voice devoid of emotion. Since you view my passing as a financial liberation, I have decided to grant you exactly what you deserve: freedom from your creditors. Courtney blinked. A flicker of hope returned to her eyes. She thought it meant Esther was paying off their bills. She thought she was getting a clean slate. She leaned forward, her greed overpowering her shame. However, the lawyer read on, freedom comes at a price. I have been aware of Trayvon's gambling addiction for 3 years. I have been aware of the $250,000 in high-interest debt he owes to private lenders, specifically the promissory note held by Mr. Vincent Moretti. Trayvon let out a whimper. He looked like he was going to be sick. He slid down in his chair, trying to hide from the words. Last week, Mr. Blackwood read, I purchased that debt. I paid Mr. Moretti in full using my personal savings. I now own the note. I own the interest, and I own the penalties. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. You could hear the traffic far below. Therefore, the will concluded for this section, I leave to my son and his wife the entirety of this debt. You are no longer beholden to loan sharks. You are now debtors to the Esther Vance Trust. The terms remain the same. The interest remains the same. And failure to pay will result in the immediate liquidation of any personal assets you currently hold, including vehicles and jewelry. Courtney let out a sound that was half scream and half sob. She looked at Trayvon with pure, unadulterated hatred. You owe the trust, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. We still owe the money. No, Mr. Blackwood corrected, looking at her over his spectacles. You do not owe the money to a criminal anymore, Mrs. Vance. You owe it to the estate. And the estate has excellent lawyers who will garnish your wages and seize your property if you miss a single payment. Trayvon put his head on the table and groaned. He had traded a loan shark for a legal shark. He wasn't free. He was just owned by a different master. And this master wouldn't break his legs. He would just strip him naked legally. Courtney looked at me. Her eyes were pleading now. Dad, she said, her voice shaking, you can fix this. You are the husband. You can forgive the debt. We are family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had tried to poison me. I looked at the woman who had planned to throw me in a mental institution. I am afraid my hands are tied. Courtney, I said, my voice calm and cold. Esther was very specific. It is a legal document. I cannot go against her wishes. Besides, you said you wanted a holiday. Now you have one. You have the rest of your lives to pay for it. Courtney slammed her fist on the table. This is insane, she shrieked. She cannot do this. We need cash. We need actual money. Read the rest. Read about the house. Read about the investment accounts. We are the heirs. We get the rest. She was desperate. She was calculating. She figured the debt was $250,000, but the estate was worth $7 million. She could pay the debt and still be rich. She could still win. Mr. Blackwood turned the page. The sound was crisp and final. We will now address the disposition of the remaining assets, he announced. This includes the primary residence, the liquid cash reserves, and the investment portfolio. Total valuation $5.2 million. Courtney sat up straight. She wiped her face. She fixed her hair. This was it. The big payout. She looked at Trayvon and kicked him under the table, signaling him to sit up. We are listening, she said, trying to regain her composure. I hereby transfer 100% of these assets, Mr. Blackwood read, into the newly created Esther Vance Irrevocable Trust. Courtney nodded. Okay, a trust. That is fine. We can break a trust. We can be trustees. The sole beneficiary of this trust, the lawyer continued, is Maya Vance. The name hung in the air like smoke. Courtney froze. She turned her head slowly, robotically, toward the young woman sitting across from her. Maya sat perfectly still. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply adjusted her cuffs and looked back at Courtney with eyes that were harder than diamonds. Who? Courtney whispered. Trayvon made a sound like a wounded animal. He looked at Maya. Really looked at her. He saw the shape of her eyes. He saw the set of her jaw. He saw his own mother looking back at him from a face he had abandoned 20 years ago. Maya, he breathed. Hello, Father, Maya said. Her voice was cool, smooth, and absolutely terrifying. It has been a long time. Since the day I was born, I believe. Courtney stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. This is a joke, she yelled. This is a sick, twisted joke. She is the beneficiary. Her, the bastard, the mistake. She pointed a shaking finger at Maya. "You are nothing," she screamed. "You are a line item on a child support check that we stopped paying years ago. You are not family." "I am the sole beneficiary," Maya corrected calmly. "And according to this document, I am the only family Esther recognized." Courtney turned to Mr. Blackwood. "This is fraud. This is undue influence. That old man put her up to this. Esther didn't even know her." Actually, Mr. Blackwood said, pulling a stack of letters from his file, Mrs. Vance knew her granddaughter very well. They corresponded weekly for 15 years. Esther paid for her undergraduate degree. She paid for law school. She was very proud of the woman Maya became. Trayvon started to cry. Soft, pathetic sobs. Mom knew, he whispered. She knew the whole time. "And she never told me." "She didn't tell you because she was ashamed of you," I said. My voice cut through his self-pity like a knife. She was ashamed that she raised a son who would throw away his own flesh and blood for a woman like Courtney. She was ashamed that you were weak. Courtney looked at me. Her eyes were wild. She was doing the math again. $5 million. Gone. The house. Gone. The debt. Still there. "Wait," she said, her mind racing. "The will says beneficiary, but she is young. She is, 22? She cannot control that kind of money. There has to be a trustee. There has to be someone who manages it until she is of age." She looked at Trayvon. "It has to be the father. Next of kin." Mr. Blackwood nodded. "You are correct, Mrs. Vance. There are stipulations. The beneficiary, Maya Vance, will not receive full control of the principal until her 30th birthday." Courtney let out a breath. "Okay. Okay. So for 8 years, someone else controls it. We can challenge for guardianship. We can petition the court. Until that time, Mr. Blackwood read the sole trustee with full discretionary power over all assets and income is Cyrus Vance." The hammer dropped. Courtney looked at me. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. I looked her right in the eye. "I control the money, Courtney," I said softly. "I control every dime. I decide who gets paid. I decide who gets cut off. And right now I am looking at a very bad investment." She stared at me. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had spent the last week treating me like a dog. She had shoved me. She had mocked me. She had plotted to kill me. And now I held the keys to her survival. She sank back into her chair. She looked small. She looked defeated. But she wasn't done. She had one card left to play. One desperate, vicious card. "The house," she whispered. "What about the house? We live there. You cannot kick us out. We have rights. We have established residency." She looked at the lawyer. "Does the trust own the house?" "Yes," Mr. Blackwood said. "The title has been transferred to the trust." "Then we are tenants," Courtney said, a manic gleam returning to her eye. "You have to evict us. That takes months, especially with a senior citizen living there. We will make your life hell, Cyrus. We will fight you for every square inch. We will strip the copper from the walls before we leave." She was grasping at straws, threatening to burn down the shelter she needed. Mr. Blackwood cleared his throat one last time. "There is one final clause regarding the residency," he said. "It is a life estate provision." He looked at me, then he looked at Courtney. "Mr. Cyrus Vance retains exclusive life estate rights to the property at 45 Highland Drive. This means he has the sole legal right to occupy, use, and enjoy the property for the duration of his natural life." He paused to let that sink in. Furthermore, the will explicitly states that any attempt by any party to interfere with Mr. Vance is quiet enjoyment of the property, including harassment, unauthorized habitation, or physical threats, will result in the immediate forfeiture of any and all residual claims to the estate. He closed the folder. "In plain English, Mrs. Vance, Mr. Vance, is the king of his castle. And you are trespassing." Courtney stood up again. This time she knocked her chair over. It hit the floor with a loud crash. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She looked like a demon whose contract had just been voided. "No," she screamed. "No, no, no. This is not happening. I planned everything. I did everything. I put up with your smell. I put up with your stupid stories. I put up with this loser son of yours." She pointed at Trayvon, who was shaking his head in his hands. "I earned this," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I earned that money. I am not leaving here poor. I am not going back to nothing." She lunged toward the table. Her hand grabbed the heavy crystal water pitcher. She raised it over her head. She wasn't looking at Trayvon. She wasn't looking at Maya. She was looking at me. Her eyes were red. Her teeth were bared. She looked insane. "You ruined everything, old man," she screamed. "You ruined my life. I should have killed you when I had the chance. I should have shoved those pills down your throat myself." She threw the pitcher. It flew across the table, spinning end over end, water spraying in a glittering arc. It was aimed directly at my head. I didn't flinch. I didn't duck. I didn't have to. Marcus, the security guard, moved with a speed that defied his size. He stepped in front of me. He raised one massive arm. The pitcher hit his forearm and shattered into 1,000 pieces. Glass rained down on the carpet. Water soaked his suit. He didn't even blink. Courtney stood there, breathing heavy, her chest heaving. She realized what she had just done. She realized she had just assaulted someone in a room full of witnesses. She looked at Mr. Blackwood. He was already reaching for the phone on his desk. She looked at Maya. Maya was calmly wiping a drop of water from her portfolio. She looked at me. I stood up slowly. I brushed a shard of glass off my lapel. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I tapped the screen. I held it up. "Did you get that?" I asked. The voice of the police dispatcher came clearly through the speakerphone. "Yes, sir, we heard everything. Units are already in the elevator." Courtney fell to her knees. She didn't cry. She just stared at the floor. The game was over. The holiday was canceled, and the hangover was just beginning. Courtney stood amidst the shards of broken crystal, breathing like a cornered animal. The realization that she had just committed assault in a room full of witnesses did not stop her. It fueled her. She was past the point of rationality. She was running on pure adrenaline and the terrifying certainty that her life was over if she did not seize control of the narrative immediately. She lunged across the table. Not at me this time, but at the document in Mr. Blackwood's hands. Her fingernails clawed at the blue paper cover of the will. She ripped it from his grasp with a feral snarl. "This is fake," she screamed, her voice shredding the dignified silence of the law office. "This is a forgery. You wrote this, Blackwood. You and that old man cooked this up." She tore the document in half. Then in quarters. She threw the pieces into the air like confetti. "Esther would never do this," she shrieked. "Esther loved us. Esther wanted us to have the house. You brainwashed her, Cyrus. You twisted her mind against her own son." She pointed a shaking finger at me, her eyes bulging. "I am going to sue you. I am going to sue this firm for malpractice. I am going to sue you for fraud. And you, old man, you are not going home. You are going straight to the lockdown unit. I am making the call right now. I have Dr. Miller on speed dial. He will sign the papers. He will testify that you are delusional, that you are paranoid, that you made all of this up." She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it on the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Maya. Maya didn't touch it. She just looked at it as if it were a contaminated object. "Pick it up," Courtney yelled at Trayvon. "Pick up the phone and call the hospital. Tell them your father is having a psychotic break. Tell them he is violent. Tell them he threw the pitcher at me." Trayvon didn't move. He was staring at the torn pieces of his mother's will on the floor. He looked catatonic. "Do it!" Courtney screamed, kicking his chair. "Do it, or I swear to God I will tell Vinny where you sleep." She was unraveling completely. The mask of the sophisticated socialite had melted away, revealing the desperate, vicious creature underneath. She was threatening her husband in front of legal counsel. She was threatening to commit a sane man. She was digging a hole so deep she would never see sunlight again. Mr. Blackwood calmly reached into his briefcase and pulled out another pristine copy of the will. "That was a copy, Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice dry and unimpressed. "The original is filed with the probate court. Tearing up paper does not change the law." "I do not care about the law," Courtney spat. "I care about the truth. And the truth is that man is senile. He does not know what day it is. He does not know what he is doing. He is a danger to himself." She looked at me, her face twisted into a mask of hate. "You are finished, Cyrus. You hear me? You are going to die in a padded room wearing a diaper, and I am going to sell your precious house to a developer who will turn it into a parking lot." I stood up. I didn't need the table for support. I didn't need my cane. I stood up straight and tall. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. "I am not the one who is finished, Courtney," I said. I tapped the screen. I connected to the conference room's Bluetooth system. A small chime indicated the connection was successful. "You said I was paranoid," I said, looking her in the eye. "You said I was delusional. Let us see what the jury thinks." I pressed play. My voice came through the high-fidelity speakers first. It was from the recording I made in the kitchen when I pretended to be confused. "Esther, is that you?" Then Courtney's voice filled the room. It was crystal clear, amplified to a volume that made it impossible to ignore. "He is losing it." Then came the sound of the slap. The sharp crack echoed off the walls. Trayvon flinched in his chair, instinctively raising a hand to his cheek. Then came the words that sealed her fate. "If he dies within 30 days of your mother, the estate taxes are streamlined. We need to cash out now." Courtney went pale. She looked at the speakers in the ceiling as if they were demons speaking to her. "That is not me," she whispered. "That is AI. You faked that." I let the recording play. "I am talking about Mercy Trayvon. He is lonely. Why prolong his suffering? Those pills I found, they are strong. If he gets confused, if he takes a double dose, who is to say what happened?" Trayvon slid out of his chair. He didn't stand up. He collapsed. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, his knees pulled up to his chest. He covered his ears with his hands. He was rocking back and forth, moaning softly. He looked like a child trying to block out the sound of his parents fighting. But he wasn't a child. He was an accomplice. The recording continued relentlessly. "We switch his medications. We hide his things. We tell him he did things he didn't do. In a month, any doctor will certify that he is mentally ill." Courtney backed away from the table. She shook her head. "No," she said. "No, no, no. This is illegal. You cannot record me. I did not consent." Mr. Blackwood spoke up, his voice cutting through the audio. "Georgia is a one-party consent state, Mrs. Vance. Your father-in-law consented to the recording. It is entirely admissible. The recording played on detailing the plan to bribe Dr. Miller, detailing the plan to sell the house, detailing the plan to let Vinny the Shark take care of Trayvon if the money didn't come through. It was a masterclass in malice. It was a confession signed in her own voice." I stopped the playback. The silence that rushed back into the room was heavy and suffocating. Courtney looked at me. Her eyes were wide and dark. The arrogance was gone. The anger was gone. All that was left was fear, pure primal fear. "Dad," she whispered, "it was just talk. We were stressed. We were venting. We would never actually hurt you. You swapped the pills." "Courtney," I said, "I found them. I have the bottle. I have the lab report confirming they were high-strength sedatives. You didn't just talk. You acted." She looked at the door. She looked at the window. She was looking for an escape route. There wasn't one. "You cannot prove I did," that she said, her voice rising in pitch. "It could have been anyone. It could have been the maid. It could have been Trayvon." She pointed at her husband, huddled on the floor. "It was him. He owes the money. He is the one who needs the cash. He told me to do it. He made me do it." Trayvon looked up. His face was wet with tears. "You liar," he sobbed. "You liar. You said he was a liability. You said we had to get rid of him." I watched them turn on each other. It was inevitable. Rats always eat each other when the ship goes down. Mr. Blackwood pressed a button on his intercom. "Send them in," he said. The door to the side office opened. It wasn't a secretary. It was 2 uniformed police officers and a man in a cheap suit who looked like a detective. Courtney let out a scream that sounded like an animal caught in a trap. She scrambled backward, knocking over a chair, trying to put the heavy table between her and the police. "Detective Miller, Atlanta PD," the man in the suit said. "Courtney Vance, you are under arrest." "No," she shrieked. "No, you cannot arrest me. I am a victim here. My husband is a gambler. My father-in-law is crazy." The officers moved in. They were professional, efficient. One of them grabbed her wrist. She tried to pull away. She tried to scratch him. "Get off me," she yelled. "Do you know who I am?" "You are a suspect in a conspiracy to commit murder," the detective said calmly, "along with charges of elder abuse, credit card fraud, and identity theft." He pulled her arms behind her back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Click, click, click. "You have the right to remain silent," the detective recited. "I will not be silent," Courtney screamed. "I will sue you all. Trayvon, do something. Call my father. Call the mayor." Trayvon didn't move. He watched his wife being manhandled by the police, and he didn't lift a finger. He looked at me. His eyes were dead. The officers dragged Courtney toward the door. She was kicking and screaming, her heels leaving scuff marks on the carpet. She looked at me one last time as they hauled her out. I hate you, she spat. I wish you had died. I wish I had used more pills. I looked at her calmly. I know, Courtney, I said. That is why you are leaving in handcuffs, and I am going home. The door closed behind her, cutting off her screams. The room was suddenly quiet again. The detective looked at Trayvon. Trayvon Vance, he said. Trayvon flinched. He looked up slowly. Am I under arrest too? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The detective looked at me. It was a question. I had given them the evidence on Courtney. I had given them everything on her. But I had held back one file on Trayvon, the file where he agreed to the plan but hesitated, the file where he cried at my door. I looked at my son. He was broken. He was bankrupt. He was alone. Prison would destroy him. But freedom would be a punishment too. Freedom without money. Freedom without his wife. Freedom with the weight of what he had done. I walked over to him. I stood over him. He scrambled to his knees. He grabbed the hem of my jacket. He buried his face in the fabric. Dad, please, he sobbed. Please do not let them take me. I am sorry. I will do anything. I will work. I will pay it back. Just please do not send me to jail. I looked down at the top of his head. I felt a mixture of pity and disgust. Get up, Trayvon, I said, my voice hard. He looked up, his face streaked with snot and tears. Get up, I repeated. Do not make a scene. You are embarrassing yourself. And you are staining Mr. Blackwood's carpet. Trayvon scrambled to his feet, wiping his face with his sleeve. He stood there shaking, waiting for the verdict. The detective waited. Mr. Blackwood waited. Maya waited. I looked at the detective. My son is a witness, I said. He is going to testify against his wife. He was coerced. He was under duress. The detective nodded slowly. He understood. I was giving him the big fish. I was giving him the mastermind. All right, the detective said. But do not leave town, Mr. Vance. We will be in touch. The police left. Trayvon collapsed into a chair. He put his head on the table and wept. Not tears of sorrow, tears of relief. The tears of a coward who had escaped the noose. I looked at Maya. She was watching me. Her expression was unreadable. She didn't judge me for saving him. She didn't praise me. She just watched. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the city. The sun was shining. The world was still turning. My wife was dead. My son was a ruin. My daughter-in-law was in a cell, but I was still standing, and for the first time in a week I felt clean. The house was empty of the vermin. The infection had been cut out. Now the healing could begin, or at least the scarring. The silence in the conference room after the police left was heavier than the steel beams I used to inspect. Trayvon was slumped in his chair, wiping his nose with the back of his hand like a toddler. He looked at me with red, swollen eyes, expecting a lecture. He expected a fatherly speech about disappointment. He expected me to drive him home and help him pick up the pieces because that is what I had always done. I had always been the safety net. He stood up shakily. I need to go get my car, he mumbled. I need to go home and figure out what to tell the landlord. I stayed seated. I placed my hands flat on the polished table. Sit down, Trayvon, I said. He froze. He looked at me confused. Dad, I really need to go. I am exhausted. Sit down, I repeated. My voice was not loud, but it had the resonance of a commandment. Trayvon sat. He gripped the arms of the chair. You are not going home, I said. You do not have a home. You were evicted, remember? And you are not going to my house either. Trayvon blinked. But Dad, where am I supposed to go? I have no money. I have no cards. Courtney took everything. That is a problem, I agreed. But it is not my problem. I slid a document across the table. It was a promissory note prepared by Mr. Blackwood. It detailed the debt of $250,000 plus interest. It detailed the payment schedule. It was brutal. You owe the trust, I said, pointing to Maya. You owe your daughter. And you are going to pay her back. Every single cent. Trayvon looked at the paper. Dad, I cannot pay this. I do not have a job. I do not have anything. Then you will find a job, I said. I spoke to a friend of mine. He runs a commercial cleaning service. He cleans office buildings at night. He empties trash cans. He scrubs toilets. He is willing to hire you. Minimum wage. Garnished wages go directly to the trust. Trayvon's jaw dropped. You want me to be a janitor. I have a business degree. You have a criminal record pending if I change my mind, I countered. And you have a gambling addiction. You are not qualified to handle money. You are qualified to handle a mop. I leaned forward. You will work, you will pay your debt, and you will do it from a distance. Because here is the other part of the deal. I looked him dead in the eye. You are banned from 45 Highland Drive. You are never to step foot on my property again. You will not call me. You will not visit me. You will not drive by to see if the lights are on. If you do, I will treat you as a trespasser and I will call the police. And this time I will not ask them to be gentle. Trayvon started to cry again. Dad, you are disowning me. You cannot do that. I am your son. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I am not disowning you, Trayvon. I am releasing you. I am letting you finally be the man you claimed you were. You wanted independence. You wanted my money without my presence. Now you have neither. You have your life. That is the only inheritance you have left. Do not waste it. I turned to Maya. She was watching me with a mixture of awe and sadness. She stood up and gathered her files. Ready, Grandpa, she asked. Ready, I said. We walked out of the office. We didn't look back at Trayvon. We left him sitting alone in the big empty room staring at a contract that promised him 30 years of hard labor. He had traded a quick fortune for a lifetime of regret. The drive back to the house was quiet. Maya drove my Lincoln. I sat in the passenger seat watching the Atlanta skyline pass by. I felt lighter. The physical weight of the stress that had been crushing my chest for weeks was gone. But there was a new ache, a hollow space where my hope for my son used to be. We pulled into the driveway. The moving truck was gone. Courtney must have canceled it before she was arrested, or maybe the company just left when no one opened the door. The front door was still unlocked. I walked in. The house was exactly as I had left it that morning. Messy, chaotic, filled with the stench of intruders. I went straight to the kitchen drawer and pulled out the number for a locksmith. I called him. I told him it was an emergency. I told him I needed every lock changed within the hour. Then I looked at the boxes. Maya took off her blazer. She rolled up the sleeves of her white blouse. Where do we start? She asked. We start with the trash, I said. We worked for hours. It was a purging. We didn't unpack their boxes. We dragged them to the curb. Courtney's clothes, her shoes, her expensive creams, her vanity table. We put it all out on the street. I didn't care if it rained. I didn't care if people stole it. I just wanted it out of my house. We found the trash bags filled with Esther's things in the garage. Trayvon hadn't taken them to the curb yet. Thank God for his laziness. We brought them back inside. We opened them gently. I pulled out the quilt. It smelled of plastic, but it was unharmed. I unfolded it and laid it over the back of the sofa. Maya found the photo of the three of us at graduation. The glass was cracked, but the picture was safe. She placed it on the mantel. We opened the windows to let the fresh air in. We scrubbed the counters where they had eaten their pizza. We vacuumed the carpets where Courtney had walked with her shoes. By sunset, the house felt different. It didn't feel like a war zone anymore. It felt like a home that was healing. We ordered Chinese food and ate it at the kitchen table. The real plates. The real silverware. Maya looked at me over her steaming bowl of rice. Grandpa, she said softly, are you okay? I put down my chopsticks. I looked around the kitchen. It was empty of the noise and the anger. But it was also empty of the family I thought I had built. I am sad, I admitted. I am sad because I lost a son. It is a terrible thing to realize you raised a stranger. I mourn the boy he used to be. I mourn the potential he threw away. I took a sip of tea. But I am also happy, Maya. I am happy because I found you. I thought I was alone. I thought my legacy ended with a gambler and a grifter. But it didn't. It continues with you. Maya reached across the table and took my hand. I am not going anywhere, Grandpa, she said. I am going to finish my degree. I am going to pass the bar. And I am going to come over for dinner every Sunday. And I am going to cook, I said, smiling. Esther taught me a few things. You haven't lived until you have tasted my peach cobbler. We laughed. It was the first time laughter had echoed in that kitchen in a long time. It sounded good. It sounded right. Later that evening, I sat on the front porch. The locksmith had come and gone. The new keys were heavy and secure in my pocket. The pile of Courtney's belongings on the curb was already being picked over by curious neighbors. I sat in my rocking chair. I had a glass of iced tea in my hand. The condensation dripped onto my fingers, cool and refreshing. Maya was sitting on the swing reading a thick law textbook. She had exams next week. She was focused, intense, brilliant. I watched the fireflies dancing in the azalea bushes. I listened to the crickets singing in the humid night air. I closed my eyes and let the peace wash over me. I thought about the funeral. I thought about the red dress. I thought about the whisper. This day is like a holiday. Courtney was right. It was a holiday. It was Independence Day. I had declared my independence from toxicity. I had declared my independence from obligation. I had declared my independence from the lie that blood is thicker than water. I took a sip of tea. It was sweet and strong. Esther, I whispered into the night air. Can you see this? I imagined her sitting in the empty chair next to me. I imagined her nodding her approval. You were right, I told her. You were always right. You knew Trayvon was weak. You knew he needed to fall to learn how to stand. I just hope he learns. I looked at Maya. She turned a page highlighting a passage with a yellow marker. She looked up and caught me watching her. She smiled. It was Esther's smile. Hey, Grandpa, she said. Do you think we can plant some new hydrangeas this weekend? The ones by the driveway look a little trampled. I think that is a wonderful idea, I said. We will get the blue ones. Esther loved the blue ones. I leaned back in my chair and rocked slowly. The nightmare was over. The house was safe. The fortune was secure. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting to die. I was ready to live. The demons had been exorcised. The holiday of the wicked had turned into a funeral for their greed. And here on this porch with my granddaughter and the memory of my wife, it was finally a new day, a good day, and I was going to enjoy every single minute of it. I learned the hard way that sharing blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. For years, I enabled a son who viewed me as nothing more than a future inheritance, while a granddaughter I was forced to ignore carried my wife's spirit in silence. We often cling to toxic relationships out of obligation, but true peace only comes when you have the courage to cut the rot out. You have every right to protect your dignity and your legacy, even if it means standing alone. Sometimes the most painful endings are actually the only way to find a new beginning. If you believe respect must be earned and justice is always worth fighting for, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of truth.